Think we fixed it? Hello? Hello? Yeah. All right, there we go. All right. Okay. So, you guys missed my apology. I started off by apologizing for being so late, and I guess also being muted. I didn't really have a reason for being late aside from, I wasn't really helping an old lady cross the street this time. I wasn't teaching a blind kid to play the piano. There was no real reason for me being late. I'm sorry about that. But, now we're good to go. We're live. Yeah. Jose I. Moreta says, did he get a haircut? He's looking sharp. No, there's a simple difference basically between did I recently take a shower and comb my hair versus most times when it's like, you see, generally I have like bedhead or whatever basically. Or if I just came back from like the gym and I'm streaming, then I haven't had like time to shower or whatever. So my hair might look shorter right now, but that's actually just what it looks like when it's not just a mess. I will get a haircut probably, I guess, next week. It is getting a little long. Alex says Morge being modest while low-key was saving children from burning buildings. Alex, I didn't want to say it out loud because humility is a virtue, but I'm not gonna say no to what you just said. Let people use their imaginations. Fotigo says, Happy Valentine's. Did you give or receive the will of D? Also, Big Mom's kids definitely pick her up from the rubble. Maybe this is how they enter the fray. Oh, so full transparency. I canceled yesterday's stream not because I had anything planned for Valentine's, but because I gave you all the benefit of the doubt, and I assumed that a bunch of you would have something to do on Valentine's. So I was like, I'm not going to stream when there's going to be like, 60% of the usual viewership. So I bumped it to today. So it was more so, I was like, I'm not gonna stream if like only half the people are gonna show up or whatever. So, I hope you all had a good Valentine's. I think it's actually very possible though that like my stream viewership would only have been affected like 5-10%. You never know, but I'll give you all the benefit of the doubt. Yvonne back from the card shop says raid fails, Sanji Germa plot happens. Zoro Sandai breaks on his skin, replace it with Nidai, learns Blackblade to win. 3 plot points resolved. Alright, so let's backtrack a little bit and unpack this. Raid fails, Sanji Germa plot happens. Zoro Sandai Katetsu breaks on... Okay, I'm on board with the raid failing. That's 100% correct. Sandai Katetsu breaks on Sanji's skin to replace it with Nidai, learns Blackblade to win. 3 plot points resolved. I don't think Zoro's going to break Sandai Katetsu on Sanji's skin, but I do think that these are things that will happen. I do think that Zoro would leave Wano with 1 Blackblade at least, because it seems like a Wano, like, it's an idea that's being set up in Wano. It feels like Wano is an arc where we eventually see Zoro reach that goal. I do think that there is more to Sanji and Germa right now, and Nidai Katetsu is the big thing that we can all agree is a big hanging plot point, right? Big hanging plot point. People are telling me I was wrong. Ninerbot says, Shanks has a dark side. Forgot he was the one that chopped off Kid's arm and ordered the bandit to be shot. Pretty cruel for Luffy's role model. It's true, but I like that side of Shanks, I like that side of Shanks. I like the fact that Shanks is like that. We don't know if Shanks personally chopped off Kid's arm, but Shanks did not kill Kid, which is a big difference between Shanks versus perhaps what Big Mom would have done. Big Mom and Kaido, they like to play with their food, right? So Kaido, his goal when he had his, showdown with Kid or whatever back in chapter 795, we all know that Kaido's goal was, okay, I'm going to break Kid, make him work for me. So that was what Kaido does with him. Big Mom, if she'd gotten her hands on him, like, I think that the roulette wheel, or perhaps being put in Monteor's cage, something along those lines. I don't know what it takes for Big Mom to decide, I'm definitely going to kill this person. New Oasis says he gives Enma back. I was of the opinion that Zoro might not be having Enma by the end of the arc, but the amount of focus that Enma got in the fight between Zoro and King makes me think that that is possibly the case. That Zoro is going to be keeping Enma going forward. In which case, if he's replacing a sword, which I do think he is by the end of this arc, Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be Sandai Kitetsu, and I feel bad about that because Sandai Kitetsu, I think, is still the coolest sword that, like, the way Zoro got Sandai Kitetsu, for me personally, I really like that scene back in the shop from, I don't know, chapter 97, maybe 98, I think it was 97. I like that scene quite a bit. It's one of my favorite Zoro scenes in the entire series, so him giving up, and the worst part is that Zoro still shows that guy. So the shop owner, right, he's not like a forgotten character. The shop owner still watches Zoro's exploits and he follows his adventures, and he has some degree of attachment to Zoro getting all the way to the end of his journey with Sandai Kitetsu. So I don't know. I for the shopkeeper's sake, I hope that Zoro never lets go of Sandai Kitetsu, but it's very possible. GK says, I need Yamato versus Smoothie if the raid fails. I've thought about that. I don't think that would necessarily be the matchup, but it's very, very possible. Very, very possible. I think it would be a cool matchup. Terry Martin says, Morge, I was wondering how you organized your manga notes, by character, chronological, theory, or what? Thanks again for saving my son from that fire. No worries, Terry Martin. It's all in a day's work. So, in general, here's how I do things, which is basically, if I'm... Okay, so let's say One Piece is the example, right? Because I didn't used to do this when I would read things casually or watch things casually, right? But once I started doing the One Piece channel in general, and beyond that, I think... now I've started applying how I do this at least to other series that I read, right? Because if I'm like, okay, I might be doing a video on this in the future, maybe at some point branching out or whatever, I'm over-explaining things. But basically, all I do is I have notepads that have general notes. So literally anytime I'm reading One Piece, rereading One Piece, whatever series basically, all of that's being compiled into general notes, right? So that's kind of scattershot, scatterbrain thoughts. You put those down into notes. Any sort of minor, small observation, right? A simple example recently, literally from the last chapter review, I mentioned the Grim Reaper thing, right? Oh, this is the second time that Zoro has encountered a Grim Reaper this arc. I didn't recall that, I did not recall initially when I read chapter 10,1036, whatever chapter it was that we saw the Grim Reapers recently, right? I didn't recall off the top of my head that, oh, Zoro versus Kamazo, Zoro also called Kamazo a Grim Reaper back in the, 100 chapters prior, right? I didn't recall that off the top of my head, but when you're reading or rereading, anytime you see something that's mildly interesting, mildly worth mentioning or whatever, you put that into notes, right? Then I always have a day where basically notes compile, right? Once the notepad gets to a certain size, I have a day where I sit down, I go through, and then I distribute into existing Google documents, right? So the only hard part is kind of deciding which one it goes into. So I have documents for characters, I have documents that apply to arcs, and then I have documents that apply to like individual themes that apply to the story, and then I have documents that are kind of broader stuff like, oh, story structure, I like this, or scene direction, I like this, or something, right? So some stuff will never be a video, some stuff I just like to have, right? And some stuff will play into other videos. The only tricky part is, I guess, sometimes some things apply to multiple things, right? Like if I have a thing that's about spirit, right? Like, oh, Oda has this line or he wrote this scene this way. Then maybe that apply. If it's a scene about Luffy, then it goes into Luffy's character thing, or does it go into the theme of spirit, right? So sometimes I double paste, but that's the gist of it. It's really not that complicated. It's literally just, you just take notes and then you reorganize the notes however will be best for you to remember. I generally think that's a lot easier than, trying to sit down and write something on a topic from scratch, because then you have to actually go do, if I wanted to sit down and write a video on, say, I don't know, like Usopp. Imagine if I had to sit down and, reread every arc with Usopp having significant moments or even small moments. I'd have to reread so much. It's way easier to just, keep track of all your notes, and then you can think about things more clearly and keep track of big picture stuff, I think, more. Justin Holland says, was Big Mom out by technical knockout? Wait, I'm skipping ahead a little bit there. I'll get to everybody else in a second. I'll get to you in a second, Justin Holland. Let me make sure I go chronologically, because otherwise things get too messy. Marcel Bean says, hi, Moich, do you think Oda would retcon Crocodile's lack of haki by showing that his will to get stronger was broken by Whitebeard, like Kaido does? I think it would be really interesting if Oda wrote Crocodile as having lost his haki post whatever it was, however many years ago, right, that he lost to Whitebeard. I think that would be great. and then we could infer that maybe by the time Marineford is coming around, Crocodile is stronger, or he's showing things that seem a little inconsistent with his previous strength in Alabasta because he's gotten his haki back, right? I think that would be great. I would love to see, if Luffy loses to Kaido here, as I do believe, I would love to see Luffy losing at least his Conqueror's haki temporarily. I would love to see that, right? If Luffy lost his Conqueror's haki temporarily, and then that would give us, the basis for believing that, hey, maybe Crocodile was stronger at this point in the story versus this point in the story, because this point in the story in Alabasta, he had not yet regained his haki or something like that. I still don't know. I do think, though, that the anime overblows a little bit how much stronger Crocodile seemed in Marineford, because in the manga, it's more like he's very bold and brash, I guess, but he doesn't do that much, right? He's not actually that, he doesn't do anything. I think the most impressive thing he does is not get knocked out by Jozu right away. But, that's not even that crazy impressive to me, because Luffy also doesn't get knocked out by, anybody that he's fighting throughout that, and Luffy takes way more damage. Kizaru multiple times, Sengoku hits him straight on. So, I don't think it's that big of a deal that Crocodile didn't get, Oda just, when Oda does durability of characters will tank whatever they need to tank, basically. You know what I mean? So, I think Crocodile and Marineford is a little overblown. I think the animated small things, make it look like he and Doflamingo were clashing evenly, whereas in the manga, it's more clear that it's, Crocodile's the one attacking, Doflamingo's kind of casually blocking. Some minor stuff like that. And people often forget, the first thing that happened to Crocodile and Marineford was that he tried to attack Whitebeard, and then he got blitzed by Luffy. It looked like, if you go back and reread that exchange, it looks like Luffy is perfectly capable of keeping up with Crocodile at that point in the story, now that he has Gear Second. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell how much is fans kind of overblowing how badass Crocodile seemed in Marineford versus what Crocodile actually did. He didn't actually do that much, you know what I mean? Again, we got a little bit of a rematch between Luffy and Crocodile, brief, right? But Luffy was faster than Crocodile, so that's something to think about. Uninspired says, how open are you to the idea of another time skip in the series? I would only like it in the epilogue. I think it greatly... I think One Piece sets up its time skip, the split between Act 1 and Act 2 so beautifully. Better than any other story that I've ever read, right? So One Piece has its midpoint really, really, really well set up. I think at this point, a time skip, unless it's a 1 week time skip or something, I don't think that that would be good for the story, just because it would be a little forced. And Luffy's already so close organically to his goal. It's why would the Straws need a whole nother time skip to get to the top, right? Okay, so Justin Holland said, was Big Mom out by technical knockout? Yes, I think so. That's kind of the definition of that. It's a ring out, right? We don't even know if the bombs knocked her out necessarily, but I do think that Big Mom will be back pretty soon. To me, that's the best way that Oda could make us believe that Big Mom is taken care of at the moment, while still very believably writing her coming back in the fray, because they really didn't, she seemed perfectly fine for the most part, and she's just been dropped down a hole. It seems really, really, really temporary from my perspective. A. Hill says, oh, we've had this question before. Who wins in 2v2? Law and Kid or Zoro and Sanji? A. Hill thinks, honestly, I think characters Zoro and Sanji tier plus Law may get the same outcome as what we got. Personally, I'm not sure how Law and Kid do 1v1 versus King and Queen. Yeah, it's really tricky just because, it's very difficult to do those comparisons, because I personally think, and I've made this clear multiple times, out of those three characters, right, out of those four characters, right, Law has not shown any 1v1 ability that much, right? He just hasn't. So we have no way of telling, how much, and as far as we know, Law in terms of, speed, actual, hockey and stuff like that, he's not on par with the rest of those characters. Maybe with Kid. Kid is also hard to tell, though. But Kid is clearly, more capable of, in terms of, raw strength, right? He can stop an attack from Big Mom. He physically stopped her attack and smashed her to the ground. He can do stuff like that. Zoro, obviously, we've seen him, deal, he scarred Kaido. There's nothing that he really has to prove in terms of, hockey and stuff like that. And Sanji, it's really hard to gauge, because Sanji got such a ridiculous speed boost and power boost that, he basically mollywopped Queen, right? So it's just hard to gauge, right? So Law's the hardest one to quantify, because we know that when he's getting opportunities to land his attacks, like we saw against Big Mom, he's probably got the most dangerous attacks, right? but he is yet to show any combat ability that's not in a like support scenario, right? Not where he's like getting the openings thanks to somebody else. So it's just very hard to say. I think in a 2v2, again, I think I would personally take Zoro and Sanji just because their teamwork is probably better. But I think it's entirely possible that both Kid and Law are stronger than Zoro and Sanji. I think it's entirely possible that they're mixed together. It's too hard to tell. Babtron says Zoro will die. Hashtag Bab thoughts. RIP Law, though. I don't think Zoro's going to die. I have thought that Law will die at some point in the story. Like, I mean, it's just, I think it's very hard to say that Law won't die. It would just be really, really weird. It's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's bad if Law doesn't die, but like the whole premise, like literally the whole premise of a Chekhov's gun, which is generally agreed upon, is that, you know, if you have set up, if you've got a gun that's on the wall in your story, right? You've written a gun into the wall in your screenplay, not screenplay, those weren't around back then, in your play, by the end of the play, that needs to have been fired, right? So the idea is that setting up things that clearly need to be delivered on and then not delivering on those is not good. So the idea that Law has this immortality surgery, that's, if he doesn't do that or that doesn't come into play in the story, then that would be, I mean, I know people get mad if I'm like, Morge says if Oda doesn't do this thing, it's bad writing. I'm like, okay, but by most standards of like, I guess any literary critic that knows what a Chekhov's gun is, they would be like, hey, that's a bad thing. You're supposed to make that happen. So I believe Oda's a really good writer, so I do think that Law's going to die at some point. Now, the flip side, though, is that, you know, maybe Oda writes it in a way, which is totally fair, that Law does do the surgery, but through some new thing that's introduced in the story, Law is able to survive it because of some other Devil Fruit ability or something like that, right? So in that case, Chekhov's gun is fired. Law still gets to survive, so that avenue still exists, but I personally think that, like, it's just really hard to imagine what Law's place is in the story going forward, because he's not written to really be an emperor, right? He's not really written to be an emperor type figure. He's not even given Conqueror's Haki, like, Oda's not writing him in that mold. So he's not really an emperor type. He's not really a rival to Luffy, right? Like, Kid directly wants to rival Luffy. Law has, there's like, it's not a very direct, clear motivation for him that like, oh, I want to compete with Luffy. He's never really written like that, right? So where he falls in the sort of pirate rat race, it's very different. And like, even throughout the Big Mom fight, like, there's points where like Law's motivation for doing this comes in, and he's thinking to himself like, oh, this will get me closer to finding out the true history, right? So it's different than, like, and of course, Law has those lines of like, your era is over, stuff like that. He has those cool badass lines where he's referencing the fact that like, he is a big piece in taking down this old generation, establishing themselves as the new generation. But he as a character, like, his primary motivation is, first of all, was to take down Doflamingo. Then his next primary motivation is find out more about the true history. So it's hard to tell how he plays into the story going forward, aside from him ultimately having some sort of heroic sacrifice, which his ability is set him up for. Mark Ross says, what do you think of the idea of the dead or afterlife crossover at some point, so spirits are temporarily stuck on Earth, and during that time Zoro actually died but isn't able to pass on? So we are in the Fire Festival scenario, right? So Oda can venture into that territory. I'll say what I personally like and don't like. All I can say is I personally think it is generally very, very, very I think a series tends to lose quite a bit the moment it becomes a situation where it's confirming that death or the afterlife, right, like, or spirits carrying on to another plane, etc., is a thing. Because the idea of, like, the power of death is, like, that it's final, right? That's why death matters. In real life, obviously, but in storytelling, that's why death is a very powerful move, because you're implying that the character's story, like, the character, their existence is now over, right? And with characters that we're very attached to, etc., that can be a very powerful thing, right? It gives a sense of power to acts like, Whitebeard going out the way that he did, Pedro making a sacrifice, Ace sacrificing himself to protect Luffy, although Ace got him into that trouble in the first place, but shit like that, So that's why death is powerful. The moment you start establishing that, like, the afterlife is a thing, so it's like, it changes your whole perception of death, because it just establishes that, like, okay, they're just passing on, right? They're just passing on. It kind of neuters the concept of death quite a bit, right? The yeah, you know what I mean? Like they're just passing on. They still exist in some form. They're on the other side. All that sort of thing. Like those are things that we tell each other in real life to make the concept of death sound less scary. Like, oh, you're passing on. You're in a better place. You're in, on the other side. I'll see you on the other side. Shit like that, right? That's stuff we tell each other in real life to to neuter the concept of death. But in storytelling, you don't want to neuter the concept of death. It hits harder when it's final. So I generally personally dislike the idea. I think there's almost nothing in the story that I dislike that I think would be worse than Luffy getting to have a conversation with Ace, for example. You know what I mean? Zoro getting to talk with Kuina. Things like that. Joey Jojo says, what are the 3 most underrated arcs in your opinion? Oh, great question. 3 most underrated arcs. It's hard to say because arcs that used to be underrated, like say Skypiea, are no longer that way, right? Like generally, here's the reason arcs become underrated, because when you're in the binge reading, catching up process of One Piece, binge reading, binge watching, right? You're getting to arcs one by one, and there's a broader story that you can clearly see developing, right? And any side trips, detours, etc., those kind of take away from that. So Skypiea was a big example. Even the Davy Back fight was a big example. Side note, really, really bold by Oda to write the Skypiea arc and the Davy Back fight arc back to back, because that's just really, I imagine that must have been really testing readers, especially week-to-week readers way back when. You know what I mean? But it just had to happen the way the story was structured. It makes sense. But point being, binging, right? When you're binging, you're like, things that are deviating from what you're really interested in, you don't like as much, right? But in retrospect, once you've read the entirety of One Piece, you're heavily immersed in this epic saga, right? Then all these little meandering detours that you can now revisit, you can go back through and gain new things to appreciate out of them. Suddenly those things stop being like disliked so much, right? And now Skypiea is an adventure with lots of secrets that you can keep going back to and, pulling things out of, right? Pulling new information out of. So what do I think is still currently in today's day and age the most underrated? I would say I personally think Baratier is still underrated in some ways. I thought Baratier is a great story. I guess I could be cheap and just say East Blue arcs. Like, I don't think Orangetown is that good. I think Syrup Village is pretty dope, and I think Baratier is pretty dope. Let me try and do something. What's more interesting than that, right? I think Whiskey Peak is a really cool arc. Little Garden, Drum Kingdom. I don't know if Drum Kingdom's underrated. Like, I think Drum Kingdom's a beautiful story, but it's mainly Chopper's backstory. Like, Drum Kingdom's a beautiful short story. Fishman Island, I think, is an arc that even Fishman Island no longer really gets hate. I think for a long time it was universally considered the worst One Piece arc. It does have, in my opinion, the most damning moment in One Piece history, which is the Sanji nosebleed. Like, it's not a big deal. Sanji's nosebleed thing isn't a big deal, but to me, reading the Sanji nosebleed, I'm just like, this is the type of moment that you're just like brutally in that moment reminded that like One Piece is ultimately not ultimately, like, in my mind, I put One Piece on such a pedestal. I'm like, it's this magnificent story, best story I've ever read. The Sanji nosebleed thing, to me, that's like a sharp moment. That's a reminder that this is like a shonen series aimed at like 12-year-old boys with like some really, really, really like moments where like some very childish types of humor just go too far, and like you know what I mean? Like, it's just a reminder of like what One Piece also is underneath that amazing story. But yeah. I don't know if I gave you the 3 most underrated arcs. I'd say Whole Cake Island. I think Whole Cake Island is great. I've already put out a video on that, and I personally think that Whole Cake Island is the best post-time skip arc the more that I've read it. Wano waiting evaluation by the end, right? Eddie Cowgill says, would you be opposed to a chapter dedicated to Usopp twerking? You say that as a joke. But, if Oda set up a scenario where one of the Straw Hats had to do what Odin did for 5 years, not for 5 years themselves, but one of the Straw Hats had to, I guess, do something like that, right? For, let's say, to spare Luffy's life or something like that. I don't know, something random. Imagine whatever scenario. Imagine, like, let's say, Zoro having to dance, otherwise, like because Orochi has a grudge against Zoro, otherwise Luffy will be killed. Although Orochi, I guess he would have no power in this. I don't know. Like there's hypotheticals where like, oh, that Odin dance that he was made to do. I wonder like if we would get to see in the modern day a character forced to do something like that for the sake of someone that they cared about, or to do something like honorable. You know what I mean? I don't think Usopp makes sense for that though. Super Cookie 11 says, "Do you think One Piece will have a really big plot twist which will turn the story upside down? I think the raid will fail." If you have not seen my channel before, I think the raid will fail. Bweezy Bird says, "What are your expectations for Loki?" For Loki? Oh, for Loki. In my mind, I'm jumping to Marvel. I'm like, why are we talking about that? Also, Caribou definitely tells about Shirahoshi to Big Mom. I would love the idea of Caribou. Like, Caribou is a fucking Chekhov's gun, by the way. We talk about Chekhov's guns with Law. Caribou is a Chekhov's gun. He needs to tell that information to somebody. That can't have been set up for no reason, right? It's really, really weird to have Caribou learn that information and then have him shipped all the way specifically to Wano through his cover story, and have Kaido and Big Mom have a plot line where they're interested in the ancient weapons, and then not deliver on Caribou in some way. So that's my thoughts on Caribou. And expectations for Loki, this is something I've kind of been realizing recently, I think I talked about it in recent streams even, is that we know Elbaf is an arc set up to be about like heavily Usopp-centric, right? And the one Elbaf giant that we already know is going to be important is Loki, who is a trickster, right? Loki, as far as we know as a god, is not the sort of traditional Norse badass Thor-esque figure, right? Like he's not like one of those type of Viking-esque figures, right? Loki is the trickster god. So I think it would be really interesting to see if like Loki has there's a bit of contrast between this character of Loki and what Elbaf ideals are, right? Similar to how Usopp, he doesn't fit your traditional idea of what a great warrior of the sea is, but he, managed to be one just the same. Marcel Beans. Wait, what's going on? Scroll too far. I scrolled too far. Where's Marcel Bean? Now I have to open up the... All right, bear with me for a second. I scrolled too far. Now I have to open up the supers page. The secret page. Secret page with the secret information. In the meantime, I'll answer Ivan back from the card shop. He says, "Do you think Wano has been spending too long on setting up, assuming the raid fails? Anything seem cut-worthy to you?" There's certain small things, especially from the raid itself, but those have nothing to do with like those would just be like cut-worthy in general, regardless of the raid failing or not. Because I think like, for example, like the Yamato bomb situation, yes, I know that Yamato's bomb, like, I get it. Like, it was somewhat important, but it also spent quite a bit of time to get Yamato roughly back into the same place without really doing much for her character. Like, I think many assume that the Yamato bomb setup was set up for something for her to do something as a character, right? Like, to get her moment, essentially. But it was kind of just like, she starts off with her and Momonosuke, right? Discussing what needs to be done about Onigashima, right? Then she explains that there's bombs. Then she goes up. Then she zigzags through Onigashima, gets all the way to the bombs, begins to deal with the yokai, etc. And then Big Mom comes through and takes care of the bombs, etc., right? Yes, Yamato freezing and things like that were important to a degree, but they also didn't really need to be, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it kind of ended up being not that important. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can justify it, but at the same time, like, Yamato is now right back in the same position that she started before she went on this goose chase, which is with Momonosuke discussing the Onigashima situation, right? She started with Momonosuke conversation about, like, what needs to be done about Onigashima. She runs, does all this bomb stuff, does some useful stuff, I guess, but, like, a lot of it felt like a situation that was set up for something a little bit more, like this yokai coming, bombs, Yamato having freezing abilities, what's going to come from all this? This seems very dire, but then it kind of just gets resolved as a byproduct mostly of this other storyline of Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom, without Yamato really getting much character shine. So that's just like an example. And then Yamato's right back where she started with Momonosuke, right? So that's just like an example. I'm not saying that, like, oh, that whole storyline, like, what was the point of that? But, like, at the same time, it's like, was it that did it have to use up that many chapters, I guess, and like, I don't know. So that's an example. I think there's certain other things that might make more sense down the line. Like, for example, we had, over the course of a few chapters, this sort of setup of like, okay, Apu and Drake, are they going to team up, right? And then at first it's like, okay, we're going to team up. Then Drake's like, no, we're not going to team up. Then like CP0 comes down, and then like Drake is taken out, and then they're chasing Apu, and it's like, what was the point of setting up a scene where Apu and Drake are trying to, like, there's if you go through Onigashima, there's points where I like to believe things will make more sense down the line, right? Like, so if maybe Oda was trying to set up for a future point where Apu and X Drake will actually team up, and Oda just teased it once earlier on, right? But at the moment, it seems like you can go through Onigashima and question like why time was spent on certain things, I guess. But yeah, we'll never know what ends up getting cut from the story or what ends up, not getting cut from the story. Marcel Beans said, Akainu and Aokiji fought for 10 days. Will we ever get a fight from Luffy that will last this long? Greetings to my fellow One Piece fan, Tobias. Greetings, Tobias. So, I don't think that Luffy will ever get a 10-day fight personally. I think Luffy versus Katakuri is kind of like the most we'll get of a taste of that. Because in my opinion, at the end of the day, like the length of the fight past a certain point, what does it really matter? Because like we could have been told that Luffy versus Katakuri took place over 10 days, right? It didn't, because plot-wise, we know that it had to correspond, like, it had to fit with the timeline of the rest of them trying to get to Cacao Island, like Nami, Jinbei, etc. But, like, all that, like, plot was happening, we're jumping back into Luffy versus Katakuri for a bit, and then go back, plot was happening, we're jumping back to Luffy versus Katakuri for a bit. Oda could have easily said, hey, this is taking place over 10 days, over 5 days, over 2 days. Like, it took place over 1 day, it could have taken place over 2, it could have taken place over 3, like, as long as the same thing is happening, which is we're just jumping back and forth to Luffy's fight, what's really the difference? Other than, like I'm saying, like past a certain, like I felt like Luffy versus Katakuri in my mind that fit the idea of this epic long battle of attrition that just like took place over a ridiculous amount of time, like an exaggerated, unrealistic amount of time. No, it wasn't 10 days, but like I don't need to see it, the text box change from like, 1 day to 10 days, really, I guess. Like, it would be cool, but you guys know what I mean? Like, I feel like we got our fill of that long battle of attrition, personally, from Luffy versus Katakuri. Terry Martin says, can Kid give an island its own magnetic field? That's a really cool idea. There is an idea that some people have been throwing around, which is that certain islands in One Piece are actually products of awakened Devil Fruit users using their awakening. So, for example, Raijin Island, maybe that was a Goro Goro no Mi user who used their awakening on that island. Enies Lobby, maybe that was a Pika Pika no Mi, like Kizaru's fruit awakened user using it on that island. And then I've seen some people speculate that like even the magnetic poles of all of like the reason all of the magnetic poles in One Piece, all the islands are in flux, is because there was an awakened magnet user who fucked all that shit up, right? Now, while that stuff is cool, and it would explain a lot of islands, I still don't like the idea, because I like the idea that One Piece also just organically, like not everything is tied to devil fruits, but the One Piece world organically just has a lot of bizarre, fantastical island concepts. I guess that doesn't really get to your question about Kid specifically, but yeah, I think that Kid, with awakened abilities to the max, could do something like that. Fatingo says, and Zoro dying and Law doing the operation on him. Oh, that'd be cool. I just wouldn't imagine Law doing the operation on Zoro. And a lot of it, because I think Luffy's the character that Law has that tightest bond with, right? And, all of Dressrosa basically serving to kind of get Law to, like if you read Law's reactions to everything Luffy's doing during the end phase of Dressrosa, you can tell that Law feels a tremendous deal of debt and, I guess debt and just bond with Luffy by the end of all of it. So Law doing it for Luffy would be great. As long as we don't end up with one of the main characters actually having immortality. So if it's more of a thing of just like saving someone's life and immortality is like a stretch or like not exactly what the ability is or the ability has different functions, then I'd really love to see that. Grizzly Adams says, Morge, would you ever do analysis videos on some of the shorter, simpler arcs like Orangetown, Logtown, Little Garden, etc.? Quick example is I've thought about doing I've thought about doing all of East Blue, because East Blue, a lot of the arcs are written in similar ways to establish similar ideas. So I could cover most of the arcs there. So East Blue I've definitely thought about doing an analysis for. And then certain other things, like for example, Drum Kingdom, I would love to do an analysis for. but I probably wouldn't do it solely on Drum Kingdom, but there is like a broader idea that you can do that Drum Kingdom can be talked about a lot in the context of that. You know what I mean? So shorter ones I wouldn't do in that sense, but I would do videos that like there's a video idea that I have that I've really wanted to do for a bit that would cover Drum Kingdom quite a bit. Joss says, "Hey Morge, do you think Big Mom falling will knock off the Big Mom's pirate ship again?" It shouldn't, just based on where she fell to. But there is an interesting idea that I think I saw Jasser on Twitter talking about, which is that she could fall through and land inside the, there's that canal, I don't know, tunnel, I guess, basically, that water tunnel that goes in through Wano that gets taken up then, I guess, by lift to, I think, Hakumai. I might be getting that wrong, the exact region. But I think it would be really cool if Big Mom landed on their ship coming through that. Because at this point, who knows why they would still be going up the waterfall. Yvonne, back from the card shop, says, "Do you think Wano has been..." Nope, we covered you. Zilla the Beast says, "Since Robin looks super young in her version of the future Strahd SBS, do you think Law might use the immortality operation on her?" I don't think that that's to be taken as anything more than, like, for fun. You know what I mean? Like, that. I don't think that that's, like, spoiling future plot events necessarily. Keenan! Oh, man. Keenan, thanks so much. Merry Christmas. Looking forward to the VOD. Keenan, you know how much I appreciate you. I appreciate the, I guess, late Christmas gift, early Christmas gift, whatever you want to say. But thanks, man. Appreciate you. Wakito D. Sierp says, I think if Zoro falls off the island, Onimaru might be the one to save him. Cool idea, because of relation they had previously in Wano. I think that would be a cool idea for sure. I think that, to me, the fact that Zoro is seemingly falling off the island, if that does happen, that's a great indication that, like, there's clearly, like, there's clearly more to happen. Sorry, one sec. Sorry, I've been talking pretty fast for a little bit. Yeah, but I'm very interested in the fact that Zoro's falling off the island in general, because to me that just looks like, okay, this is not the usual setup, right? Onimaru being the one to save him. I do like the idea of Onimaru showing up in Zoro's storyline again, right? Because I think that it felt a little unresolved, like their little dynamic, basically. So I'm looking forward to more with Onimaru potentially. But I don't think it would be bad if, like, Onimaru never showed up again. He gave us a good story. GK says, "What did Big Mom mean about the One Piece and Wano?" There are some very, very interesting ideas going so far, like, not my theories, right, but theories that I've seen people post that I think are really, really interesting, which is going as far as arguing that, like, Wano is the remnants of the Ancient Kingdom, if not the Ancient Kingdom itself, or something that was created in the aftermath of the Ancient Kingdom with islands being pulled together, things like that. So I don't know if One Piece itself is necessarily in Wano. Some very, very compelling theories with, like, a tremendous amount of evidence. I don't know if I would think that One Piece itself is in Wano, because I think that'd be fairly anticlimactic if they're collecting the road poneglyphs and those never really matter because they're already here. They're in Wano. No need to go to Elbaf, etc. But I think that we are set to get, like, a lot of information about, the history of the world itself, and just valuable information as to what the One Piece is being in Wano. Joey Jojo says, "Now what are the 3 most overrated arcs in your opinion? Excluding Wano since it's unfinished. Release those steamy hot takes." Oh, Joey Jojo, you set me up so cruelly. Can't believe you do that. I have to give my most overrated arcs? I think that's easy for me, though, actually. I think Dressrosa is probably the most overrated arc in One Piece, because I see people putting it above Alabasta, and I don't think it's particularly... Like, I think Dressrosa is a good arc for what it is, but it's like... It's also just like... I think the fact that it's a long arc fools people into thinking that it's, like, a very, very, like... How do I say this? Big story. Whereas it's not, like, actually, like, a really big... Like, Alabasta is a much grander story than Dressrosa. Dressrosa takes place in, like, literally, like, half a day. Like, I think, like, literally half a day. It takes place in the span of, like, a morning, basically. With half the cast of characters, it's clearly a setup, right? It's a setup, like, explicitly mentioned multiple times. Like, this is essentially a side quest to getting to Kaido. It's a very small location. The plot actually moves along very, very quickly in Dressrosa. It's just that, like, Oda fits in so much with the Grand Fleet, and it's, like, a lot of kind of checking off boxes, like, oh, look, Sabo's here, and, like, kind of giving us an idea of what's going on in the broader world. But if you actually look at, like, the tight story of Dressrosa, and what, let's say, like the protagonists go through over the course, like what Luffy goes through over the course of Dressrosa, or the Strahds go through over the course of Dressrosa. It's like, it's actually a very compact little story. It's like not a very extensive storyline by any means. It's just like, oh, that fits a lot of like extra stuff around it. Versus Alabasta is a fairly grand storyline where, like, I mean, you have arc after arc after arc of buildup of getting to Baroque Works and dealing with, you know, Crocodile's minions, etc., and like really building up this brewing conflict. Like, we had so much context about Alabasta before even getting there. Dressrosa, we kind of get there, and then we find out through flashbacks. There's multiple flashbacks too, so like that adds to the length of Dressrosa. But we get there, and like Dressrosa is really like, it's not a very big grand storyline by any means. And I think like definitely in terms of like how much it emotionally affects the main characters, it's not that much compared to something like an Alabasta. I think Dressrosa is a very good storyline for what it is, which is a side quest, like Doflamingo is a mid-boss on the way to Wano. But as a storyline in itself, it's like long in terms of chapter count, but it's also just like a very short, compact little story that happens to be stuffed with a lot of extra like juicy bonus fluff. Like, hey, Sabo's here. Hey, the Blackbeard pirates are here. We learn about the Grand Fleet, right? Like, we're adding more members to the crew and stuff like that. So I think Dressrosa is overrated in that sense. I still think it's a very good arc, in my opinion, for what it is. I guess I'm saying it's overrated in terms of comparison to something like Alabasta. Now, beyond that overrated, I don't know. Like, I don't think that there's really... What's an overrated One Piece arc? I think Skypiea is now treading into the territory of it was underrated for so long that people are now maybe overrating it a little bit. You know, like, I see people kind of shitting on people who say that they don't don't particularly like Skypiea that much nowadays. So like maybe it's gone a little too far where now it's like the defense of Skypiea has gone so far that it's like, no, you got to have it in like your top 5 One Piece arcs. But even that, I think, is maybe I'm just scratching for things. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. What's one more overrated One Piece arc? I don't think people overrate Thriller Bark. I think no, like I think that the arcs that I got two. I guess Dressrosa and Skypiea maybe. And even those I think are good arcs, you know. I like those arcs. And yeah, I guess I got nothing else to say on that. GK says, what did oh no, we covered that. Covered Jojo. Alright, DREZ, Drez says Zoro could fall on/near Ryuma's grave and something could happen there. Or Onimaru finds Zoro and we find out more related to his heritage. There is so much that like I don't understand about Zoro's, like the significance of Zoro's heritage in Wano. So as long as we get to explore that in some meaningful way soon, I'll be very happy. But to me, it just looks like with Zoro, we have not actually covered that much for him, for his character that much, you know, so far. And I think that the things that were kind of set up about him in Act 2 are not really too relevant to what we got of him out of Act 3, or particularly just the King fight. So there's a lot more that I think we got coming for Zoro, in my opinion. MMM26 says, did you notice the pants? What? Did I notice the pants of the awakened koala guard in Impel Down? Do you think the Rising Sun and Fuji... I did not notice the pants of the awakened koala guard in Impel Down. Do I think the Rising Sun and Fuji are referencing Wano plus Beast Pirates Awakening? I'm really confused. Do I think the Rising Sun and Fuji are referencing Wano plus the Beast Pirates Awakening? I don't get it. The pants of the awakened koala guard in Impel Down. Do I think the Wano, Rising Sun, and Fuji, so Mount Fuji or Fujitora, are referencing Wano plus Beast Pirates Awakening? All I can say is this. Wait. Why don't I just look up what you're talking about? Impel Down, awakened koala. Wait, koala guardian. Right. Koala? Mino koala. So let's take a look. Oh, what? Guys, take a look at this. This is pretty cool. Do I have to look at all of the pants of the guards now? This is a cool detail. I guess you guys can do this on your own. Look up the koala, for the awakened koala. MMM26. That is a great little detail. That's very, very interesting. Very, very interesting idea that there might be foreshadowing for Wano on the koala's pants. But I don't know, chat. You guys can look it up yourselves. Decide how much weight you want to give, to it. But that is a very interesting detail that I would never have noticed myself personally. Really cool idea, MMM. MMM, if you wait, that was your name, correct? Let me just double check. MMM26. If you tell me your Twitter username and you tweet that at me, I'll retweet that. But that's pretty cool. Don't know if that's reading too much into it, but that does seem like a very specific detail to draw onto the pants of a random fodder guard from early on in the story. I like to think foreshadowing. Let's see where it goes. Carl Ars says, what do you think of how devil fruits are handled lately? It seems to me that devil fruits are becoming more of a soft magic system, used to be more grounded. You're right with awakenings, right? Before it was kind of simple, right? Like the idea is like, oh, Luffy's a rubber man, now he can stretch and stuff. But now we're opening the door to the idea that Luffy can, I guess, magically change the ground or something around him, right? To turn it all into rubber, right? Which is closer, like, there's a difference, right? So, I mean, Law's abilities you could always say are magic, but at the same time, many Devil Fruit abilities seem more simplistic and grounded, and some of them are kind of just body modifications, like Buggy can chop his body in half. But now opening up the possibilities to, like, being able to do all sorts of crazy things and transform the state of the world around you. That is getting closer to magic, right? How do I like it? I'm not against it. Like, I'm not against. I think that there's cool stuff that comes out of Awakening. This is one of those things where I'm like, okay, it does change a little drastically how we think of fights in One Piece and what we think of the potential of fights in one. Like, when a series is kind of carved out like a style of like how combat goes or whatever, and then you start introducing more crazy elements that, you know, I guess on the one hand, we've had the most Awakening we had Awakening, it's not like Haki. With Haki, we had lots of hints of Haki beforehand. Awakening, we kind of just had the Impel Down guards, which is more like grounded, right? Which is more just like, oh, you're a zone user. Well, now you're a fucking jacked up, roided out zone user. Versus something like Doflamingo, I can turn this entire island into strings and stuff like that. Like, you know. But at the same time, so on the one hand, instinctively, I'm like, okay, like, we're changing up the power system kind of drastically and turning the fighting into something pretty different. But at the same time, the fighting does, at its core, remain somewhat the same. Like, you can look upstairs at Luffy versus Kaido. It's still kind of what we expect of One Piece combat, physical fighting. And at the same time, like, I find Awakening cool enough that I don't really care. Does that make sense? Like, I'm down to see more Devil Fruit Awakenings. That's basically it. Babtron says, describe Morge as a One Piece character, Devil Fruit, Haki, etc. So this is where it gets funny, because I personally think that I would be similar to Trafalgar Law. But I don't like Law as a character that much. Maybe that's just me, my own view, I guess, but I think that like, if you guys know, anyone who knows me for a while, like for the early years, you know that I used Law as my avatar for quite a bit, and Law's not even one of my favorite characters. I just felt like it represented what I wanted the channel to feel like. I did take the Devil Fruit personality quiz once, and I got Basil Hawkins, which I think is relatively similar to Law, and I like Basil Hawkins as a character quite a bit. So I'd be happy to be Hawkins or Law, even though Hawkins gets fucked up. I still think he's a cool character, in my opinion. And I think that there's more potential for him in the story. Long Ring Longland is overrated. I don't even know who overrates Long Ring Longland, right? Like, it's kind of just like one of the most niche arcs out there. Shonen Empire says Usopp will unlock Conqueror's Haki moments before his death. His one flaw is cowardness/fear. It would make sense for him overcoming his fear of death, making him a true warrior right before his end, a final test. I would love a scene like that. I would love a scene like that. Him earning Conqueror's Haki in his grandest moment. Just like more symbolic than anything else, right? Like, in that moment, he is a conqueror. Like, he is a great spirit, the same way that, you know, Whitebeard, Luffy, those Shanks, etc., Zoro, these sort of like grand heroic spirits are. I would love to see a scene like that. I think it would be great. First name, last name says, do you think Jewelry Bonnie's fruit can make anyone she wants eternally youthful, including herself? I think that there is a strong possibility that one of the reasons that the world government wanted Jewelry Bonnie back so bad is because she has some ability to keep people really youthful, right? So some variants of Law's fruit, maybe Law's fruit grants immortality. She can keep people. So Law's fruit, you can literally not die. Jewelry Bonnie's fruit is more like you can keep yourself young, right? So you're not immortal, but you can at least prevent yourself from dying of aging. And I guess with the combination of those two factors, you get a really, 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 really powerful being. You know what I mean? So maybe Drusser says Morge doesn't know what a soft magic system is. I get the idea. Like, you know what I mean? Like I guess Nen is a hard magic system, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. But like, this is how I see it used when I see people using it to compare like power systems of different stories, right? So soft magic system being like, I guess things that have more rules and stuff like that, and hard magic system, I guess when it gets like really, really like technical with how those rules are set up and stuff like that. Tell me if I'm wrong on that. Do you think Jewelry Bonnie's free? Yeah. Answer Jewelry Bonnie. Mam6 says, hey Morge, I think, wait, no. I had one last thought on that, which was just that, like, yeah, maybe the world government needs Jewelry Bonnie again, just because, hell, maybe it's something related to Im, right? So Im's immortal, but maybe not eternally young, so you need Bonnie to keep him young, something like that. But clearly the world nobles or the world government needs Bonnie for something, and I imagine it would be something youth-related. Mam6 says, Mam6 or MAM6? I'm going to say Mam6. Hey Morge, I think for King to start panicking during his fight with Zoro and wanting to defeat Zoro, me and Zoro started getting through his defense. What do you think? Yeah, right? Wasn't it clear that Zoro's getting through his defense? Right? Like, what else is there to say? Zoro fucked him up. Zoro, once he had his Conqueror's Haki down, he was basically like, at that point, he was able to fuck up King pretty well. I don't think there's anything else to really say that, right? Jose Lario says you'd be Spandam Morge. Okay, so that's a different take on it. It's a different take on it. Everybody's saying I'd be like Spandam Kobe. All right, I'll stick to my opinion. Renstan says, have you ever thought about who the O'Hara scholars traveled with? I'm thinking that they taught the Rocks pirates what they know with no Roger Connect. Who the O'Hara scholars traveled with? I'm thinking that they taught the Rocks pirates what they know with no Roger Connect. What? They taught the Rocks pirates what they know. Oh, I see what you're saying. So that's how Rocks gained the knowledge that he gained? You know, potentially about the... I just don't know if Oda would write it like that. Like the O'Hara scholars were allied with Rocks or something like that. At the same time, Whitebeard was allied with Rocks. I just don't imagine like a bunch of scholars traveling around that Rocks ship. The Rocks ship sounds like it was basically like a very cutthroat setup. You know what I mean? Not even cutthroat setup. It just seems like a very aggressive aggro setup of a bunch of like really, really like Conqueror's Haki, you know, concentrated pirates all in one ship. I mean, Whitebeard himself told Odin that, like, hey, a ship with a bunch of conquerors doesn't work out from past experience. So I have a hard time imagining, like, a bunch of, like, mild-mannered scholars hanging around there. But maybe Rocks did pull information from O'Hara scholars rather than being, you know, nakama with them or whatever. Japanese Jim says, do you care about the Marvel movies at all? Any thoughts on the Oscar noms? Sorry if this is the wrong stream to ask that, lol. No, of course it's not the wrong stream to ask that. Marvel movies, I stopped caring. I had mild interest in Marvel movies at some point. Like, they're fun to watch, you know, with friends. You know, they're not something I would watch by myself, basically, but they're fun if you're in a group or whatever. And I stopped caring really after, you know, the whole Thanos storyline ended because there's just not a lot to care about after that. Yeah, I guess there's not much else to say on that. You know, maybe if they get some really, as far as I understand, especially with, like, Multiverse of Madness or whatever, now their new route seems to be capitalizing on, like, like, let's just connect all of our franchises as much as possible, basically. And, that's always going to get views. The problem is that has. Here's my thoughts on it from, like, a little business perspective, I guess, basically, which is just that, like, that's a really, really good way to get short term views. Just, now we're past connecting our own franchise pieces together. Okay, let's start pulling all Marvel stuff. So you like the X-Men series? Well, that's here now, right? Like, you like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man stuff? That's here now. Things like that, right? Venom, sure, he's in. I assume Deadpool, stuff like that, right? So that seems like their next step. Then but that's the baby step, right? Because as far as I can tell, that's only got such a long lifespan. That's got a very short lifespan, right? Pretty soon you're gonna run out. Like, what? We're gonna really care to see those Fantastic Four characters joining in on this or whatever, right? Like, so you can only do that sort of crossover stuff so many times. So soon it worked really well with Spider-Man, but soon you run out of stuff, right? So then the next big thing, and this is where they're probably really, really pushing towards, and this is where, like, big money stuff comes in, and this is where, like, I really, really wonder, like, this is where the business war behind the business that starts happening, right? Which is just like, you're gonna need to start expanding outside of Marvel. So the stuff people joke about, which is like the Marvel DC crossovers, the Marvel Star Wars crossovers, things like that, that's the future way down the line, which they're definitely gunning for, right? That's what they're definitely gunning for. If they can get there, and, like, people are, like, the amount of money, like, who owns the properties and things like that, and the deals that need to be cut, etc., like, that's the really difficult part, but that is the future in theory, right? I mean, there was a time I remember, like, 5, 6, maybe 10 years ago, probably 10 years ago, where the thought of, like, Spider-Man being part of the MCU was crazy, because everybody knew that Sony had, like, their claws on, they had an iron tight grip on that Spider-Man, property, right? Like, they're not gonna let Marvel, like the MCU, have that. But now it's like, oh yeah, of course they've got Spider-Man. Oh, of course they're bringing X-Men and stuff. Of course they're able to, like, get, move past all of these barriers, right? So in the future, yeah, Marvel is probably pushing towards, like, this crazy era where, like, everything is a crossover with the MCU, basically, which is just, I don't know, which, it'll be fun blockbuster stuff, I guess, maybe in theory, but also fucking stupid as shit, I think. But who knows? Any thoughts on the Oscar noms? No, I don't think that there's anything, like generally the Oscars are, like, not a thing that matter in the world of film, basically. Like, they matter in the most surface level. Like, how often, like, the best movie wins the Oscars, or, like, how often the best movie isn't even, like, nominated for the Oscars. And when I say best, I mean, like, the movie that, like, is actually impactful or actually notable and is actually going to be looked back on 10, 15 years down the line. Like, the Oscars, like, they're just not a thing. Like, I haven't looked at Oscar noms in, like, years. I mean, the simple thing to remember about the Oscars is that, like, it's not voted on, like, the way it works is so kind of ridiculous. It's just, like, it's voted on by people in the industry. It would literally be like, it's just, you're like, it's voted on by people in your industry. It's like that's all it is, right? Like, how many of them are even watching all of the movie? Like, most of it is just, like, the connections you can make, and kind of like, hey, you guys are gonna vote for me this year, right? Shit like that. Like, it's not a real thing. It's not being decided by. It's just not like, it's one thing. Okay, like, our viewers decide voting on this shit. Our critics voting on this shit. It's like, no, neither of those. The people who are deciding this shit is the movie industry itself. It's, like, actually bizarre. It makes no sense. It would be like, I don't know, like, it would be it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Gone Death 2 says, you think we will get a kid/Law versus Luffy fight? A kid/Law versus Luffy fight? No. I don't think that's happening. Sausage Lord says, the raid will fail. I agree. Love your videos, brother. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hans Ding says, every big YouTuber who have been catching up to One Piece love Wano. Totally not Mark, Mother's Basement, Murphy. I think Wano is just great binged. This is just, okay. Okay. So a couple things. I'm not going to say anything in particular, all right? But you guys don't know, how do I say this? how much I really hate to say what you see is not necessarily the full scope of what people feel, because you have to understand, and this is not saying anything about anyone in particular, but this is from like we YouTubers talk, etc., right? We YouTubers talk, information gets around, etc., right? Just because, like, especially with the One Piece community, most of these people you've mentioned have all had their experiences where they've said something, an honest opinion, and gotten a very negative reaction from people that were previously really praising them. Okay, and they keep that in mind. All right, so that's all I'll say. So that's one, and two. That aside, right? Just because someone is catching up on Wano and really enjoying it, why is that in any shape or form relevant to like what your opinion on Wano is? That doesn't mean Wano is good if one person is catching up and is like, "Oh, I think Wano is really good." How does that affect? What does that mean? That means literally. What does it mean if one person catches up and they're like, "I really like this arc"? What is that? So it's like the world depends on this person's opinion. How is that person's opinion any more like? This person's opinion should have literally zero relevance to whether or not you think Wano is a good arc, right? If they're talking about certain aspects and arguing certain aspects, right? Like maybe there's certain arguments that they're bringing up for why something is good or bad in their opinion that you haven't thought about before. But that is literally not like, that's just one person's extra opinion on, oh, I like Wano. That has nothing to do with anything. And to be frank, it's an opinion that's basically contingent on, I guess, this being their livelihood to a degree, right? So keeping that stuff in mind. Babtron says, what does Oda have planned for Usopp and Wano? Hashtag Bab. I think Oda could have a lot planned for Usopp and Wano. I put a video out on it like a while back. But Usopp and Wano, the big thing that he was talking about for a long time was that he's really scared of being taken hostage. Really, really scared of being taken hostage. So to me, that's an indicator of something that could happen to him down the line. Because that's something that's come up multiple times, basically. Miss Super Chat from Gabe C. Thanks, Pirate Hero. Alabasta is by far the most overrated arc in the series. Don't give me that. Go back and read it. Crap. I did it. I did that like a month ago. I mean, I think Alabasta is pretty straightforward. Like the most, I guess, representative arc of like classic One Piece, or I guess like what the, you know, like what you expect out of One Piece storyline, right? So sort of grand scope conflict, right? A lot of build up and world building, nice set of characters representing the country who you can get behind, and a powerful storyline for the Straw Hats, really getting them invested in the storyline of their friends and making it so that you feel what they feel for their friends, and you see the highs and lows that they experience in their journey, their adventure to fight for their friends. Powerful foreboding villain who makes the main characters like overcome like extreme challenges and extreme highs and lows that they hadn't had to before. And then everybody at the end of the day gets their fights, they get their shine, they get their big moments. Powerful emotion towards the ending section of it. And yeah, I think across the board, Alabasta is just a really good One Piece arc, like representative of a really good One Piece arc in a nutshell. I think you can watch Alabasta from start to finish, read Alabasta from start to finish, and it's basically like, you know, this is something that would be really good to introduce someone to One Piece to. You know what I mean? Keenan says, appreciate you and your vids/streams carrying a lot of my sleepless nights lately. Keenan, I appreciate you quite a bit. You are very literally my favorite person to see popping up in streams. Do not feel obligated to do the type of donations you do. I obviously appreciate it, but you're nuts, man. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Kakashi, what do you call? Let's go up. Kakashi Snitch 9 says, are Kainu and Kuzan's devil fruits the only ones to counter the water directly, Kuzan being able to freeze the water and a Kainu being able to evaporate it? The only ones to counter the water... Oh, I see what you're saying. Kuzan can freeze, a Kainu can create magma. Shoot. I guess the other ones that could do it are probably Logia. Katakuri can obviously create a large amount of mochi. No, but mochi, as we saw, actually is negatively affected by water to a degree. I guess anything that can create large amounts of a substance, basically, that can help quite a bit. 991616 says Morge does the same in his reviews, no big deal. Yeah, I mean, like, we're all guilty of it to a degree, but I just think it's genuinely hilarious to me when, like, I see people pointing to YouTube, like look, this person said they liked it, therefore it must be good. It's like, one, why the fuck would this person liking it on their first reaction have anything to do with your opinion? Like, what? It makes sense if you're like, this person gave like a really comprehensive analysis and breakdown of like all sorts of points that I hadn't seen before as to why there are aspects of the arc that I hadn't appreciated before, therefore the arc is maybe better written or in certain ways that I had not thought about before, right? That's one thing. But if it's just like, I like the arc, and then you're like, oh, I guess that means the arc is good. I'm like, what the fuck is that argument? Secondly, you realize that this person's livelihood is contingent on them continuing to get good views from people and like essentially giving the One Piece community what they want to hear, right? This is not a representation of like an unbiased and I'm not saying anybody is lying or anything like that, but I'm saying that every one of these React YouTubers, right? They experience what happens if they share something that people don't want to hear versus what they do want to hear, and they experience levels of toxicity, right? And Totally Not Mark went through that, right? I don't know anything about him personally whatsoever, right? But that's example, right? He went through that with certain things, and like he learned from it, and what you learn from it is you don't always give your honest opinions if you're a reactor to anything. Like it's just funny to me when people use reactors as like representative of like, oh, this is the best unbiased, purest case of what the Wano reading experience is like when it's actually the total opposite. It's probably the most biased reading experience you could get an example out of. Nandu V says, what do you love most about Steel Ball Run? Like Gyro and Johnny. Gyro made it seem like Gyro greater than Johnny. What I love most about Steel Ball Run is probably, how do I say this? It's hard to explain because Steel Ball Run, the biggest strength is kind of its almost bizarre, like the combination of elements that come out of Steel Ball Run, right? Because I can't believe I said bizarre to describe JoJo, but you get what I mean, right? So it keeps so much of the JoJo elements of sort of like unnatural, almost theatrical characterizations, right? But then also the sort of like surreal abilities and just like mind-bending abilities that you get throughout the series. But then also the type of, characters that you're getting specifically in Steel Ball Run, where like everybody has some degree of like complexity to who they are, or like, I hate using the morally gray phrase or whatever, but I think everyone is more complicated than they seem, and like the directions that their characters go are more complicated than like you would probably expect at first. The hero is not as compelling as some past heroes, but in a way that makes him more compelling, right? Seeing his journey, whether he even deserves to get the journey he does, right? And then the villain, on the flip side, there's maybe more of an argument for this villain being in the right to a degree than any other. But at the same time, he's still a villain. And then just certain elements, like I don't want to spoil certain elements, but just like the sort of, I guess, without spoiling the specifics of it, like the religious nature of certain key core components and everything like that, it gives the whole thing a sort of like one of a kind feel, right? Like when you're reading from Steel Ball Run, especially the latter half of it, and just like the types of encounters they have, like Sugar Candy Mountain and things like that, like things that feel so, I don't know, like mystical, but at the same time surreal, but at the same time like everything connects in a sense, like to give an overall, like I don't know how to explain it, right? And that's one of the things that makes Steel Ball Run special, right? But like the way so many different elements combine to give you this sort of like just strange trip, right? Like the strange trip that makes you feel certain things, makes you think about certain things. The only thing that I really hold against Steel Ball Run is that some ideas he clearly forgets about, or he starts writing a theme around it and it kind of falls apart or doesn't really lead anywhere. And I think that that's something that I tend to care about more, just because like when I'm reading it, I'm writing lots of notes on certain things, and then I can clearly see when like, okay, he's not leading anywhere else with this idea, or this idea was kind of swept under the rug and things like that, right? But I think Steel Ball Run is just a special arc. Pat Galley says, have you read Tokyo Ghoul? Opinions. I've watched like the first 2 seasons. I didn't love it, but people tell me that the anime is really bad. So, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't feel anything special about Tokyo Ghoul, but as I understand, it's like very different than the actual, the manga reading experience. Neil Smith says, you think that there will be a hockey where your crew's willpower becomes your strength. Oh, like how Luffy got up against Lucci when Usopp yelled at him. I would really prefer not, just because that's getting too like that's like very literally the power of friendship. It's like very literally the power of friendship. I prefer the idea that like Luffy, it's more meaningful to me that Luffy, because Usopp was putting himself in that situation, Luffy, because of that, had to push himself to reach a new height to reach that, to be able to accomplish something that he couldn't before, right? I think that's a lot stronger than just like, oh, my friend is here. Okay, now I'm stronger. You know? Kobe, thanks. Appreciate it. Barnaby Jones says, have you heard the theories about Pizarro being a former member of the Beast Pirates? In the flashback of Odin's castle burning down, Jack was only 8. That would be really cool. Provide some more extra lore. You know, I like the idea of like past histories of these types of pirates like intertwining. But at the same time, it's like, when do we really get to flesh that out? Trevor Roberts says, how would you feel if there is no Kaido flashback? I think everyone would feel very, very, very blue-balled, basically. Very, very, very blue-balled. I think that if there's no Kaido flashback, I think Oda probably cut one of the most important things and saved some things that, you know, are maybe not nearly as interesting to the reader. I think we could chop out that whole Ice Oni section and not lose a thing. Hans Ding says, my point is that we are in an echo chamber of older One Piece fans. Go somewhere like TikTok where new One Piece fans binged everything. Wano is generally being placed next to Water 7/Marineford. There's echo chambers, like, I think what, how do I say this? There's also people that just drop One Piece. You know what I mean? Like, I know people, like, that literally don't really move past the series. But, like, I personally know people that don't move past the series to, like, because it's gotten to a point where they're just not that interested anymore. And that tends to happen more so post-time skip. I know very few people who drop the series pre-time skip, but I know people who have dropped the series Dressrosa. My closest, like my first friends who really, really got me into the series. No, they didn't get me into the series, but like they were the first friends I had like growing up in my neighborhood who also were into One Piece, right? They don't like, they still follow Wano, but they've kind of dropped out of the, what do you call? Like the community enjoyment, etc. of it. Like they don't interact anymore with, you know, just One Piece content or anything like that because they're not interested anymore. I do think that in general, post-time skip and particularly Wano has been a big self-filtering because most people who are not enjoying the arc basically kind of tune out. And that's just the way that it is. So yeah, people who really, really like Roof Piece and everything like that, they're going to be hyped up about Wano. People who think that there are certain things missing that One Piece is, like, you know, like this is just something that it's organically going to happen over time. You know what I mean? Covered if there's no Kaido flashback. Surreal Soviet says, do you have a favorite color spread off the top of your head? Do I have a favorite color spread off the top of my head? Yeah, I think so. No, I want the color walks really, really bad. I think those are the things that I really, really want to own. I've never wanted to own the physical volumes because the translations are so shit. But the color walks are something I've really wanted to own. The one off the top of my head that I really like, that I don't see referenced a lot, is like, they're on this train that's like flying through the sky. And I really like that one. D-Rez says, cursed swords have personalities. Mihawk Eyes has 2 irises instead of 1. Getting a black blade will give you the Hawk Eyes. We never saw Ryuma. Getting a black blade will give you Hawk Eyes. We never saw Ryuma's eyes in Monsters. Plus, Hakuba has always Hawk Eyes, which could be due to split persona. But Zoro doesn't have those eyes, and he has cursed blades. I think that doesn't really follow in my opinion. In my opinion, I don't think that really makes sense. Ender Ayanami also said Zoomer opinions, which is also another point. Conquer D Hockey says, watch/read Jujutsu Kaisen. It's incredibly good. I've read Jujutsu Kaisen up through the Shibuya incident. Then I saw that the manga is actually set to end in roughly the next 2 years, and that was like maybe a year ago. So I'm just gonna write it out and wait till the manga ends. Like, I'm cool with waiting even if it's more than the 2-year estimate, if it's like 3 years, I'm cool with waiting that much and then binging it. You know, and people are roasting that it's TikTok, so I would agree. Mr. Crescent says, do you think deep down Garp actually wants Luffy to succeed and bring the dawn? I feel like he didn't do much to make sure him and Ace became Marines, and he's always proud of their feats as a pirate. He is always proud of their feats as a pirate, but he did, I do think, sincerely want Luffy to become a Marine. I don't know how much Garp knows about the whole concept of the dawn, everything like that, right? So because we don't know how much he knows about the concept of the dawn, like, I don't know how much Garp has, like, if Garp knew of a concept of, like, oh, like, there will be a dawn to the world and, like, the world nobles will be taken down and stuff like that, I don't think Garp would be necessarily against that, because as far as we know, Garp does not support the world nobles, and he's refused promotion many times to Admiral because he does not want to be under the thumb of the world nobles. So, like, I don't know about that. One sec. Let me just check. Make sure I'm not behind on anything. Okay. Some people saying Jujutsu Kaisen is pretty mid. I think Jujutsu Kaisen is very enjoyable. I think it's very enjoyable. And I'm not 100% caught up, but I thought the Shibuya incident is one of the cooler things to come out of shonen manga in some time. And I read Jujutsu Kaisen very biased. Because if anybody remembers, Jujutsu Kaisen was coming out around the same time as Chainsaw Man was coming out. Right? And they were actually competing almost in a way. Yeah, they're competing almost in a way, in terms of, like, they're not similar actually, but, like, they have some level of, like, they're both darker shonen. Like, Chainsaw Man is actually, like, fucking nuts, but there's just there was a bit of a rivalry, I think, between fan bases at a point, and I read Chainsaw Man first, and I love Chainsaw Man. So I went into Jujutsu Kaisen being like, okay, this is gonna be shittier than Chainsaw Man, and I was pleasantly surprised. So I went in biased, and I quickly reversed my bias because I was just like, no, I like this series quite a bit. Is it overrated? Like, I don't know. I have to catch up on it. You know what I mean? But I like the Shibuya incident arc quite a bit. I'll say that. Like the Shibuya incident arc quite a bit. I think it's an enjoyable series. I think that it's probably never going to make me feel, like, super emotional in a way, in my opinion. I think it's never going to get, like... No, I don't even know why I'm trying to talk down on Jujutsu Kaisen. I think it's a cool series for what it is. I think it's a really cool series. And I think it's a breath of fresh air, I guess, in terms of, it's different than I think many of the other shonen series we got going on right now. But Chainsaw Man, I think, is, like... not only more unique, but I think it's, like, potentially, like, it's drastically different from, like, any other manga I've read, period. I've not read Fire Punch, which was his earlier series. The Pirate Hero, what's up? What do you think Kobe's final role will be in the main series? So not like what he does in an epilogue. So in my opinion, and I've always said this, and it goes against what I think a lot of people want Kobe's role to be. This is my opinion, which is that, like, I think a lot of people want Kobe to be this really badass Marine fighter, like Admiral by the end of the series. I think that happens in the epilogue, right? I don't think Kobe's role is ever in the main series to be this badass Admiral figure who's like just doing a shit ton of work through, like, taking down bad guys or whatever, right? I think Kobe's arc, right, like what Oda consistently does with his character, which I really like. What's special about him is that he is a weak character, always. He's always a weak character who has to find the courage to stand up and essentially stand up sometimes for himself, but also just in general, stand up for himself and often to do what's right, right? So go against what he wants, but stand up for, like, still stand up to some greater force despite being weak, right? So that's Kobe's character. It's not the same, like, in a way, he's prototype Usopp before Usopp, but Kobe only has 3 major moments in the series, right? 3 major moments in the series. Okay? One is when he stands up to Alvida, right? He stands up to Alvida. So what's the conflict there? He's weak. He knows Alvida can kill him, right? He's terrified. But in that moment, he knows that the right thing to do is stand up for himself and stand up for his dreams. And so he tells Alvida what he really thinks, right? And then he's rewarded, right, by Luffy beating up Alvida for him. right? Next is he has to stand up to his own friend. He has to stand up to Luffy, right? So Luffy's he's trying to goad Kobe into basically like fighting back against him as they're leaving the Marine base, etc., right? And again, Kobe, like, he has to fight back. Like, he's a weak character, right? Like, Luffy's picking on him in a way, I guess, but Kobe has to stand up and fight back. And the biggest one, obviously, is Kobe at Marineford. It's a straight up mirror of what Kobe did the first time with Alvida, which is, you know, a stronger force. Kobe is very, very weak in comparison, but he knows that it's not right, right? He knows what Akainu is doing is not right. And in that moment, like, he's standing in front of Akainu, he does not get out of the way. He stands up for himself and he speaks his mind. Kobe always throughout the series, like, the important thing is that, like, he, despite being very weak, despite not having really, like, the strength to carry something out, he stands up for what is right and he speaks his mind. I think that is the strength of Kobe's character. And I think, you know, the Kobe we see today, he is stronger than he was before, but I don't think he's going to be Admiral level or anything like that. I think the next time we see Kobe have a big, big moment, it will be similar to the big Kobe moments that we've had previously, which is Kobe as a character having to stand up in some way to make some sort of a change, right? Despite not being able to physically fight or physically do something, right? So, you know, I'm not saying Kobe will be, like, it's the same way that, yeah, Kobe got a lot stronger pre-time skip. So by, you know, he's using Soru and everything like that and some, you know, some Rokushiki techniques. Like, he clearly got way stronger from, like, Chapter 1 to, like, the Marineford War. But Oda still keeps him as a relatively weak character. It's not his strength that is supposed to make a difference, right? It's the strength of his voice. So, to me, that's Kobe's ultimate role. Like, yeah, I'm sure he got stronger over the time skip. I'm sure he's, I don't know, like, he's a rear admiral now, right? Maybe he's even almost as strong as a vice admiral, maybe as strong as a vice admiral. But I don't think his final moment in the series is going to be, like, him pulling off some, like, big victory or something. Maybe he'll get a fight, but I think his most important moment will likely be having to stand up in some way for something that is right, right? Maybe it's in front of Akainu again. Maybe it's in front of fucking Im for all we know at this point. But, like, I think that's Kobe. Lucky Man says, "Hi Morge, love your videos. What do you think about my crackpot theory?" Thanks, Lucky Man. "What do you think about my crackpot theory? Act 3 ends with Luffy dying after defeating Kaido." Act 3 ends with Luffy dying after defeating Kaido. Raid will fail and succeed at the same time. Act 4, everybody sad. Act 5, Law revives Luffy. That's a very... I just don't think that Oda would ever write an arc like that, just because it's not... Like, when Oda truly wants to write the finale to an arc, he wants it to be very, very cathartic, right? That's how, like, in a victory scenario, right? So, Alabasta, Dressrosa, Anis Lobby, right? Arlong Park, right? You want that big feeling of victory where, like, the big villain has finally got down, everybody's celebrating, everybody's happy, big party, right? I don't think it, like, Luffy winning, but at the same time dying, and then, like, a whole act of people being sad, and then Law reviving Luffy, it's not the One Piece style, so I personally don't think that makes sense, but, you know, I get you. Conqueror D. Hockey says, "Onigashima / the rooftop is the pinnacle of the pirate world. Big Mom being beaten by Law / Kid is symbolically and literally her falling from the top. Love that." Yes, it depends if she is actually, you know, out for the count, basically. So, let's see. I do like, though, that, you know, she does go from up there all the way down, 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 and now buried deep underneath Wano. I do think Kobe's an admiral by the end of the story as an epilogue, in my opinion. But I don't think he's, like, that strong at the moment. Joe Mama says, "So you think Kobe is not going to beat Hancock?" I don't think Kobe's even supposed to beat Hancock. Like, I don't think that they sent, like... It just doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't think that they would send Kobe to take out Hancock. Like, even if we, the reader, think Kobe is stronger than a rear admiral, right? Like, even if hypothetically we think Kobe is, like, stronger than a vice admiral or something, the Marines themselves have Kobe ranked at rear admiral, so they're not going to send some rear admiral to go capture Boa Hancock, right? If the Marines have any brain whatsoever, they would send Fujitora. Fujitora is the hardest Hancock counter in the entire world. So, you know, I never got the implication that Kobe is the one who is supposed to take out Hancock, but rather he's part of a squad that's being sent to take out Hancock. So let's see. One sec. TCB, the People's Champs. Where's TCB at? TCB says, "Good evening. What's up?" Mr. Crescent says, "Have you read Siren? I started trying to read Siren, but I kind of lost interest early on. It's an older series, but very underrated and has good choreography, very interesting mystery and characters. I'll maybe give it another try. I think Siren, I wasn't super hooked early on. I guess that's not fair because like there's so many series that aren't that good early on, but then get better. Like I thought Ranking of Kings. So I'm watching Ranking of Kings right now, right? And I got like one episode deep into Ranking of Kings to start with, and I was like, I hate this. I hate this main character. I hate this show. I think it's really, really fucking boring, right? But then upon urging, I kept watching, right? And then after a few episodes, now I'm like, okay, I think I'm 7 episodes in or whatever. I really like the main character, and I really like the show, and I think it's great. So maybe Siren, I should have given it some more time. I mean, I think if I were to pick up One Piece today, maybe I don't really like it off the first chapter. Mazget says, have you heard the theory that Blackbeard's devil fruit can make him invincible like other Logias, but only in complete darkness like Crocodile with water? I have heard that. I've heard that combined with basically like he can become darkness. So that was how they put the tarp over Blackbeard and Whitebeard, and Blackbeard in theory became darkness, went inside Whitebeard, scooped out his devil fruit, and came out. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Explains some of his abilities. Diego C says, hey Morge, my favorite character is Crocodile. What role do you think? We were just talking about Crocodile. What role do you think he'll play in the future? Love your videos. Keep up the good work. I will answer that question as soon as I come back from the bathroom. That is my new strategy that I've been doing for like the last 10 streams, basically. Leave you guys with a question, a juicy question about Crocodile, and then I come back. So as for Crocodile is tricky because Crocodile is a character that I have literally there's so many characters that you can kind of see like Lucci, right? Lucci, Kaku, those guys get bumped up to CP0. Makes sense. You can reincorporate them into the story. Gecko Moria, he can't do quite a bit, but he can be reincorporated. We can bring him back into the story to see him get fucked up, basically, right? And maybe he does have some role to play at the end of all this, right? He's had such a tragic story, right? There's things that you can do with Gecko Moria that make sense. I think Wapol, he's back to he's a villain again. He's a minor villain, right? But it's funny you can slot him into being the ruler of the Evil Drum Kingdom, stuff like that, right? Crocodile is just tricky. Crocodile is just he's too significant. He's not like a Wapol, right? He's actually a significant villain, right? He's more like a Lucci in that you would expect him to have some significant role. But unlike a Lucci, there's no clear structure that he fits into, right? It's he's never going to be a Yonko. That's not in the cards for him. Shichibukai, that's done. The world government's not hiring him again, and in fact, he's one of the reasons that they abolished the whole system, right? I guess the bet, where would he fall? Would he just become a subordinate to someone like a Blackbeard or something like that? I don't think that fits. Crocodile actually flat out disrespected Blackbeard the one time they met in Impel Down. Like, he's got too much of his own attitude to ever work for somebody else. It's just really hard to imagine, like, what Crocodile exactly, like, where does he fit? The only place that makes sense, I guess, is, like, as one of the many underworld brokers. But that in itself seems almost too minor for him, unless he kind of fills Doflamingo's spot as, like, the new, fills Doflamingo's spot as the new biggest underworld guy, right? But the whole underworld system as is going to get thrown up in the air once Kaido and Big Mom go down, as they're kind of the biggest buyers, I suppose. So it's just like, and like we've learned about this, right? Like Caesar, manufacturer, Doflamingo, seller, Kaido, Yonko, etc., buyers, even world government, right? Through essentially going through pirates, right? Doflamingo is the middleman. So it's just like Kaido. Not Kaido. Like Crocodile, where does he fit, right, in that sort of established structure? I don't think Luffy would ever want him as an ally. So Crocodile's just, I don't have a good theory on Crocodile. I wonder if he's a character that Oda brought back because Oda just liked the idea of bringing him back, rather than having a clear idea of where he would fall. My guess, if it makes sense, is he's an underworld broker and he may be important in that, but I don't know if he's got like a big plot importance down the line. You know what I mean? I think Oda may just find a way to bring him back in rather than having had something like definitively planned. Diarrhea says, how will the world government fight against the Strats? They'll have Law plus Kid plus Wano Samurai plus Whitebeard Remnants plus Revolutionaries plus Shanks plus Boa's Kingdom plus Alabasta / Dressrosa / Fishman Island and probably more I've missed. Yeah. So I talked about this, I think, literally last stream, but we're heading towards a scenario where Luffy and his crew are going to be Goliath and the world government's going to be David. Right? Like, unless SSG is absolutely insane, way beyond our wildest imaginations, I think that the world government might be fucked. I think that the way it could make sense, though, here's the way it could make sense, is if the final war is incorporating more than just, like, if the final war incorporates not just the world government, right, and the Straw Hats, but rather lots of parties are involved, so world government is involved, but also the Blackbeard pirates are involved, and also Revolutionary Army is involved. Like, if there's multiple factions involved, well, I guess Luffy wouldn't really fight the Revolutionary Army, but you know what I mean? Like, multiple forces to contend with, and then I guess, like, a lot of Luffy's forces will be peeling off to deal with whatever. And I also imagine that with the final war, we're not going to get, like, I don't think, like, every single character, like, I don't think, like, Yamato is going to get a big 1v1 in the final war. I don't think, like, I think a lot of it will basically be, like, world government has larger numbers, but Luffy has quantity over quality, so you get to see, like, you know, the stronger members of the giant friendship alliance basically getting to, like, wreck, like, Dory and Broggy probably wrecking a bunch of the giants, giant squad or something like that, you know, stuff like that. Or Yamato just tearing through a bunch of vice admirals or something, you know? Nehemiah Sium says, what if Crocodile reformed Baroque Works and it's now called Buggy's Delivery? I don't know about that. Crocodile wanted nothing basically to do with the old members of Baroque Works. He only wanted Mr. One, which is interesting to see. And I don't think that he is behind Buggy's Delivery, in my opinion. Captain Face says, Saboti, Strahd save Kami, lose to world government, Ace in danger, Summit War starting. World government, Strahd beat Kaido, lose to world government, Sabo in danger, final war starting. So you're saying like similar chain of events? If you count saving Kami, yeah, they saved Kami. So that's you could see it loosely. Yeah. I don't think that they lose to world government though, because like the point is different. Like Saboti was an arc, like saving Kami was like supposed to be like a minor win before like they had the world fall, like the sky fell on them, right? Wano is clearly an arc that's set up for victory in the long run, right? Like it would be very, like it's just, you know, like if the whole thing just ends with the world government like beating them down, right? Taking over, like everything was for nothing basically, and like beating Kaido doesn't really mean anything because you just lose to the world government right after. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Like I think like Oda, this is written more like a Water 7, any Slabi, Alabasta type thing. Like you want to see the Strahds get their big win, advance forward in their pirating career, get new bounties, get new status, stuff like that. You want the ripples to affect the world. Would feel very disappointing if all of this is just for the world government to win, in my opinion. Power Ranger says there's no way Garp doesn't have Conquerors if he's going head to head with all the top tiers back then, unless his armament is just godly. I mean, Garp might just be a case study in how good armament could be. So I think that's totally possible. Would be, cool to see if Garp is actually able to just keep up with everybody just through armament hockey. I guess one thing to note is that when Garp and Chinja had their little clash, right, the one time we saw Prime Garp fighting, there was contact, right? So Garp was not using Advanced Conquerors hockey, as far as we know. Maybe he had no need to use something like that against Chinja, so that's the reason. But I wouldn't be surprised if Garp just doesn't have Conquerors hockey, and the fact is you can just keep up with just armament. If your armament's just really, really high. I think that'd be cool if Garp's just the guy whose armament is so fucking good that it can keep up with Advanced Conquerors hockey. Mario Castillo says, Morge, love the videos, but what happened to the plush contest? Contest? Also, you need to upgrade the Stream Room. Why don't I read that as Stream Room? The plush contest doesn't exist. There is no plush contest. It's just the plush. Oh wait, I think I know what you mean. Some sort of contest for people taking photos of their plushes. I genuinely forgot about that. So that's actually a really good idea. I could do that. I don't want to promise something that's not going to necessarily happen, but I do think that'll be fun. There are 200 plushes out there. So we could do something fun with it. Guys, can you post some plush contest ideas in the chat? What could we do with that? Also, I need to upgrade the Stream Room. Yeah, I've had to do that for so long. I've just been putting it off. Because, I hate having to do, I guess, room design. Does that make sense? That's why I went lazy with it earlier. And then nobody liked it. So now it looks like this. But I do want it to look nice. But I'm just so lazy with room design. I'm like, well, what should it look like then, right? I'm down to just upgrade the whole room, but I'm just what should it look like? I think I need to take a day to basically figure it out and then just pay for it pretty much. Yeah. Clown FX Studio says, what's your take on the Crocomom theory? Don't know if it's serious or not. I guess Crocodile being Luffy's mom is, I guess, the oldest joke One Piece theory. I guess it's probably been around since probably Marineford Impel Down. So to me, it's not a funny theory anymore, I guess. Well, I think the joke's kind of played its course, but you still see it pop up once in a while. The Pirate Hero says, which character are you most excited to see more of? For me, it's Bella Betty. I really like her, lol. Okay, that's a good question. What character am I most excited to see more of? Out of Wano, I wanted to see more out of Ashura Doji. I think there were some. Yeah, I guess let's say characters not in Wano, right? So let's say characters not in Wano. Because I wanted to see more out of Hawkins. I wanted to see more out of Ashura Doji. I think those things are still possible, but let's say not Wano. Dragon is easily the one I want to see most out of. But out of the Revolutionary Army commanders, I think Bella Betty is the most she's got the most I guess interesting. We just don't really get that. She's the only one that talks. You know what I mean? She's the only one that we really get idea of her character from 904. We get a bit of Morley, right? And a bit of I guess we get the bit of what Karasu is like. Lindbergh, you know what I mean? But Bella Betty's kind of the star of the show. Phantom Greyfire, thanks. Miss Super Chat from Ethams. Bestie leaving us on a cliffhanger for so long nullifies the retention-keeping goal. I completely forgot about it by the time you came back. Leaving us on a cliffhanger for so long nullifies the retention. Oh, you forgot about it by the time I came back? No, come on. The cliffhanger works perfectly fine. I'm not going to be dissuaded from doing the cliffhanger just because one person tells me that it doesn't work. I'm just going to ignore it. R.I.P. Joe Rogan. No, he's Okama, King of Impel. Who are we talking about? Mr. 2? Why are we talking about Mr. 2? Alright, I've missed something here. Super Quad says, have you thought about how messed up it is that Kaido got a devil fruit that lets him turn into a fish, but he loses the ability to swim? Well, I don't think it's that messed up because he also gets to turn into a dragon. So I think that kind of cancels out the fish part of it. But, if you're really attached to the if you're really really attached to the swimming aspect of it, and it's just like, fuck, all I do is I get to turn into this gigantic dragon that can fly through the sky and control the weather, but you really really wanted to be able to swim a little better, then yes, you would probably be pretty disappointed. Why are we talking about Joe Rogan? What's come up here? What have I missed? Sometimes I look at chat and I'm just like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Fortingo says, my grandma asked, why did Luffy have a beard when she looked at the plush that was in my bookshelf? She's reading One Piece. Oh, that's... Wait, your grandma's reading One Piece? That's so cool. You know who the oldest grandma One Piece fan in the world probably is? Luffy's voice actor. It is still insane to me, like, just thinking about, like, this 90-year-old grandma that voices Luffy. Just, like, all the most raw, crazy Luffy yelling action moments. And it's all just this, like, this old woman who's just, like, 5 feet tall. She's just a sweet grandma. I think it's hilarious. Gordon Bullock says, would you like if Blackbeard killed Shanks? I'd be down for Blackbeard killing Shanks. I would love for Blackbeard to kill Shanks. Uswin Dawadi also asking, what do you think about Blackbeard killing Shanks? That Luffy doesn't have to fight Shanks and perfectly set up with Blackbeard as the final war. I would love to see Luffy and Shanks fight, but in a tie, like there's a draw sort of situation. So it's not like Luffy has to take down Shanks. I think if Luffy took down Shanks, it would kind of take away from some of, the excitement of seeing Blackbeard finally take down Shanks. Viso Serious 1 says, it's a meme to say that Joe Rogan died. That's a meme? I did not know that's a meme. Lightless Shine corrects me and says, bro, she's like 60, LMFAO. I'm sorry, she's not 90, I'm sorry. She's just, my mistake. I made some assumptions. Joe Mama says, I would love Blackbeard to kill Shanks. I would. I think it'd be great. I think that Blackbeard should definitely kill Shanks. Blackbeard, at the end of the day, being the guy that kills Whitebeard and the guy that kills Shanks, great final villain. Emil Diaz says, what if Shanks killed Blackbeard? Then Shanks is probably set up to be the final villain of the story, which I don't think is going to be the case, but would be kind of wild if that's what we're heading towards. Phantom Greyfire says, Morge, any chance of a Randy Troy collab? I think we're set to do one... I think we're set to do one maybe this week. I'm not sure. I think on his channel. So, I think that's still happening? Not sure. Jose Larios says, it'd be cliche. Yeah, but like something... Like, that's like saying like, Luffy beating... Lucci is cliche. Luffy beating Crocodile is cliche. Like some things are cliche because they're good, Blackbeard, like having the villain kill the mentor or whatever of the main character, like the big good, the big bad killing the big good. That's a cliche, but it also it works pretty well in stories because it accomplishes what you need to accomplish. It gets the emotional stuff going for the main character, increases that personal antagonism, whatever. It eliminates the big good, right? So on one hand, it like creates a greater sense of desperation for the good guy's side to win once they've lost that key figure, that really, really strong, powerful good guy figure. And it establishes the villain further by like increasing their sort of sense of threat in the story, setting them up as like, this really final boss type vibe. It works. There's no reason, like if something works, there's no reason not to do it unless you have something like way better, right? So when people talk about like subversion or whatever, yeah, like subverting for the sake of subverting, I think we all know it's not good. But if you have like a really interesting opposite direction to go that subverts for a reason, that makes sense, right? Power Ranger says, Joe Rogan's daughter watches Demon Slayer. That's interesting. Let me tell you how far I'm in Demon Slayer. I am maybe like 5, 6. Yeah, Juan Perez says Jiraiya's death is cliche and amazing. Yeah, like Jiraiya's death is really good, right? Cliches, I don't know. Okay, here's the thing with cliches. So, there's certain things that like, I don't know how to say this. There's certain things that you get closer and closer to the core of why we like stories, right? Like, let's say you're cutting away the cliches as we go, right? Like, you're cutting away the cliches as we go, right? Let's say, like, how about damsel in distress, right? Oldest cliche, right? So that's something that was a constant in every story for a long, long, long time. I'm not saying damsel in distress is never good, but at a certain point, people started being like, okay, this plot point is something that we find cliche, it's overdone, right? It kind of makes some people roll their eyes when they see that every story, right? So you're cutting that away, right? And in general, what we call cliches is like over time, right? People are identifying more and more like common patterns that you're just like cutting away and being like, okay, we see this too much. Like it's overdone. There's not really like a way to. It's not exciting anymore. Some people say like Chosen One stuff also went that route, right? But as you cut away, kind of like identify pieces that are cliches and keep going down the list, at a certain point you get closer and closer to the core of like, okay, no matter what, we always like this stuff in stories, right? You can subvert these things and still have something really good, but we're still never going to call these things cliche, right? Hero defeating the villain, that's just something you, like at the end of the day, that's often like no one's ultimately going to call that a cliche, because once we're getting to a bare bones sort of like, what do we really want to see out of this story? It's like, okay, hero defeating the villain, that's something almost all of us can agree on. That's like something satisfying that we will always like seeing in a story. Again, you can subvert that, but that's not the same as like saying that's a cliche, right? The climax being at the end of the story, that's like that's never going to be labeled a cliche, right? Like once you're getting to the real bare bones of like what, like how storytelling works, right? Or like what we like in our stories, that's when you stop calling them cliches and just being like, okay, this is the fucking patty at the center of the hamburger, right? Like, let's see how we can rearrange these other condiments around it, right? We don't always want like mayo. Maybe sometimes we do ketchup, right? But at the end of the day, you want a fucking beef patty at the center of that burger, right? So I'd say like, something like Blackbeard killing Shanks. Yeah, it falls into the category of cliche, but it's also just like, yeah, it's like cheese on a burger. It's like, it's so good, right? Like, why would you just throwing that away for the sake of throwing it? Like, it's a cliche, but like we like it so much that it's probably going to stick most of the time. There's no reason to throw that away. DREZ says, which warlords do you think have been captured? Great question. In my opinion, it might unfortunately just be fucking Boa Hancock. I think it might just be Boa Hancock, which would be terribly, terribly sad for all of the Boa Hancock fans out there, people that really like, like people that really want to see the one, I guess, woman Shichibukai shine, right? But I think it might just be Hancock. Reason being, Marines have a hard Hancock counter in Fujitora. And second, that Oda quote where he's talking about how like, oh, some really bad things are going to happen to Sabo, Vivi, Hancock, right? And Sabo and Vivi, last we saw, they were already in hot water with the world government, potentially captured. If you're adding Hancock to that list, it's like, okay, so maybe the three of them get captured, provides incentive for Luffy later down the line to want to go up against the world government. I think it might just be Hancock. I think Weevil does not get captured because Weevil, his story, like, we're just getting started on that. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think Weevil we're just getting started on. So I think we still need to, like, we don't even know what the deal was with Bakin and Rocks and all that. Like, Weevil's direction right now, he wants to get to Marco. It would be kind of bizarre for Weevil to get captured right now, in my opinion, but maybe there's something there. Eat Ham says, sorry, babe, I'm baked. Memory isn't my forte right now, so I forgot about it. Also, Randy Troy remains the only streamer to say my goofy-ass name correctly first try. I think I just got it. Eat Hams? Unless it's Ethams. Maybe I got it wrong. Clown FX Studios. Thanks, I appreciate it. Can't wait for Kaido's victory cry, says the demon. Me neither. Aaron says a hard Hancock counter, lol. Yeah, I mean, that's what he is. Ender Ayanami says, I hate that Weevil exists so much. Why? What's wrong with that? I think I got Eat Hams right. I think I got it right. Red X says there's no way Bo Hancock gets captured unless it's on purpose. I don't know if Hancock would ever get purposely captured by the world nobles who she hates, like world government, world nobles more than, than like I don't think Hancock ever gets purposely captured. You know what I mean? She hates the world government. She hates the world nobles. Um, but I do think there's a solid possibility she does get captured just because of what Oda said. You know? Sanji and King could fly. Still, we got King versus Zoro. Zoro versus Shiryu is just an easy matchup like Luffy versus BB. Shiryu is a confusing one to me because I don't get the power set that he's kind of like invisibility. That threw me for a loop, you know. Shiryu, like it just doesn't. What I'm imagining kind of with Shiryu that kind of makes sense to me is like, okay, so like I imagine Zoro would peak, right? Like his most important swordsman duel would be versus Mihawk, right? So that's his peak test as a swordsman, and I think Oda kind of would probably want to keep it like that, which is maybe why if the Shiryu matchup is later after Mihawk, Shiryu would have to be a different kind of opponent. So not just like a, I'm sure it's still a very strong swordsman, right? But maybe that's why Shiryu's given the invisibility fruit, because like if Mihawk is supposed to be the hardest true test of swordsmanship for Zoro, where he like reaches the culmination of everything he's been working towards, then the next challenge, I guess, if that's Shiryu, hypothetically, it would make sense that that challenge is more, I guess, more of a tricky matchup, right? Like someone who does not fight like a true swordsman, like invisibility in itself kind of goes against the idea of what, you know, everything that Zoro values in terms of a true swordsmanship duel, right? Like Zoro doesn't even like the idea of like facing your back to the opponent, right? Let alone like turning straight up invisible and like, I guess, like Zoro in general has like kind of criticized, like, you know, he's always had some sort of comment about the use of tricks in these swordsmanship fights, right? I guess with Shiryu, right? Like maybe that makes sense in that Shiryu just provides a different, like a more of a sneaky sort of not straight up swordsman duel type challenge for Zoro, right? End of story. I think that would make a lot of sense. John says he could just make his sword invisible. Yeah, like no matter what, it has to work against observation haki, and I think that's something that still hasn't been addressed in the story, which is like, you know, Queen turning invisible, Sanji turning invisible, right? Like Shiryu turning invisible. How do these things work with observation haki being a thing? Because observation haki should make it so that you don't have to see anyone to be able to attack them. We've seen this with Fujitora, right? Clown FX Studio says, what's the difference between cliche and trope? Opinion. Trope is not a cliche. Trope is just something like cliche is when it's like we've seen it too much, right? Like some people see that feel like they've seen it too much, so like now they don't like that, right? Trope is just an observed trend, right? So trope is broader than cliche, as far as I understand. Maybe somebody else has like a more nuanced take on it than that, but that's my understanding. Trope is just like a broader thing, like, oh, you can identify this sort of a trend or something like that, right? And like tropes, the interesting about like if you go on the fucking like TV tropes or something, like you can realize some tropes exist that like are so subtle you would not have thought about it before. Versus cliche is something like, oh my god, we see this trend, this specific trope, I guess, so many times that like it's now just a cliche, right? Like again, damsel in distress, that's the go-to cliche that I guess you could say nowadays. Mr. Crescent says, do you think Oda will give the Big Mom Pirates 1v1s with the Strats, or maybe have them team up with the other Beast Pirates, or keep their gag status? I don't think Oda has them keep their gag status. In my opinion, I do think that the Big Mom Pirates, like, if things go, well, I mean, I can stop saying that. This is the stream, right? You guys already know how I think, right? In my opinion, right, for whatever the final setup of Wano is, right, assuming that they lose here, I do think that the final set, like the reason that the Big Mom Pirates were kept out of this was just to minimize like the amount of shit that Oda had to cover for now. But I do think that like the final setup will be against both Beast Pirates and Big Mom Pirates. And I think that like having both those sets of characters will make it so that there's enough matchups to go around. So for example, characters like X Drake, Apu, several of the Straw Hats, like they're not getting matchups here. But I do think that the Big Mom Pirates provide for like even Yamato, right? Stuff like that. I do think that the Big Mom Pirates provide more matchups basically to go around, but Oda kept it limited for the moment. Barnaby S. Jones says, have you seen Sora 7 Mage's theory about the Adam/Eve trees? It has an interesting prediction regarding why Shiryu has the fruit he has. 3 months old. I have not. I've actually, I think, never seen a Sora 7 Mage video. Like a full Sora 7 Mage video. I think I've seen like just browsing, like, I think I've opened up a Sword 7 Mage video just to see, like, oh, this is what Sword is, kind of, like, and maybe seeing, like, a bit of a chapter review or something. But I really, really don't know, like, maybe I would really like Sword 7 Mage videos. I have no idea. So I'll give that a watch. I didn't know that he's a theory guy. I'll take a look. Sounds interesting. Because I have no idea how the like Shuri's fruit, the invisibility fruit at the moment, to me it just makes sense to give Zoro a different kind of matchup, like a more tricky matchup. But yeah. Beyond Paradise says, do you think Luffy's devil fruit is the one the Gorosei were talking about? Thoughts on Euderon's amber/oil theory? I've not watched Euderon's theory on the other devil fruit, on like Luffy's other devil fruit. All I've said basically, and like it's not fair to give opinions without seeing the theory. My first initial gut reaction is no, I don't like the idea that Luffy's fruit is not the rubber fruit, because it's just so it's so baked into like our understanding of who Luffy is. Like so many chapters, right? And then we find out it's the oil fruit. I don't personally like that sort of a reveal, but sure, maybe he's got a really convincing thing that could make me like it. I hope that it's not the fruit that the Gorosei are talking about, although it would line up. I mean, it's a few things, right? It would line up with, who's who talking up the gum gum fruit, but then at the same time, like when the Gorosei were talking, it was panning over to Zunisha. I've mentioned this before. I do not like the idea of Oda just like tricking for the sake of tricking, basically, which is just like, oh, let me show Zunisha, but I'm actually talking about Luffy's devil fruit. Like, it feels like a very artificial way to basically like make the chapter cliffhanger more exciting versus like hinting at the fruit being related to Zunisha in a way. Gustavo says, is there a character you think will show up in Wano? Is there a character I think will show up in Wano? Let me give you the, I guess, most surprising take. Yes. I think Weevil will show up in Wano. 3 reasons. I was debating whether I make a video out of this at some point or something, and I was just like, it's not lengthy enough for it to be a video, but I can talk about it here. Maybe I'll make it a video if I get a little bit more. But I'd totally forgotten about Weevil. My reasons for why Weevil might end up in Wano is, one, the obvious. Weevil has the most reason to go to Wano because Marco's there right now, right? I doubt that he just got captured, right? So a week ago, we know that he was being hunted by the Marines, but I highly doubt that he just got captured. It would be very abrupt and random if Weevil, from his very introduction, barely get to know him, he gets captured, right? So we know a week ago he was dealing with the Marines, but his ultimate goal is Marco. So I do think possibly, like right there, motivation to go to Wano, yes. Second, does it fit with what we're focusing on in Wano right now, right? So, first of all, Wano, Weevil has direct Rocks connection, right? The Weevil backing storyline, that's playing into the Rocks situation, right? This whole thing with Wano, we've been talking about Rocks, hearing about Rocks, right? We're getting we're gonna get some more info on the Rocks backstory, right? Kaido, Big Mom, right? What was the deal? Like even Whitebeard referencing Rocks during the Odin flashback, right? Rocks is what's really being talked about. We're set to learn more about that. Bakin was a pivotal figure in that, right? So Oda's baking in the Bakin Rocks connection early on. So there's something there, right? So it's not like Weevil and Bakin are irrelevant to what's going on in Wano right now. Rocks and Marco, like, it just makes sense that whatever the deal is with their story might be fleshed out pretty soon in the story in One Piece in general right now, right? 3, Wano is an arc about identity, right? So identity, like people finding out their identities, false identities, things like that. Weevil's entire character revolves around the fact that he has mistaken his identity for being Whitebeard's son, right? Entire character revolves around that fact. He is under the biggest impression of he is very comparable to Yamato in a sense, right? Very comparable to Yamato in a sense in that Yamato believes that she is Odin, but she thinks, at least in the more spiritual sense, she's the Odin successor. Weevil literally thinks he is the next Whitebeard and that he is Whitebeard's son. So they're under similar delusions. And then finally, the parallels kind of like, we're elaborating a little bit more on like the father-son, like, so we have Ace and Roger being referenced here, right? Like Ace and Yamato, Ace and Roger, but then Yamato and Kaido, right? So like sort of the son of these pirates, right? Ace, the son of Roger, right? Connecting with Yamato, the son of Kaido. And that was a big deal when they first encountered each other, right? Ace, the son of Roger, Yamato, the son of Kaido. And then you also have Bakin, related to the whole Rocks, Big Mom backstory, etc., right? And she's proclaiming that she's got the son of Whitebeard, the one and only true son of Whitebeard. So there's a lot of soft, like just weird reasons that make it seem like, yeah, Weevil to Wano makes sense. He's got the motivation. Uh, his lore, the lore around him is relevant to the lore of Wano with the rocks connection, etc. Thematically, it fits, right? With the identity stuff, the parent-child stuff. Like, there's just things that fit with Weevil that suggest that him coming to Wano would make a lot of sense. So, if there is a second half to Wano, I think Weevil is the surprise character that I think makes the most sense here. Andrew says, Shiryu will kill Mihawk through underhanded tactics and take Zoro's final goal and mentor. Zoro embraces the path of suffering and will suffer this. I don't know about embracing the path of suffering and suffering this, but I do like the idea that, with the Blackbeard Pirates, I imagine the Blackbeard Pirates taking down the Red-Haired Pirates in a sense, and I've talked before about Mihawk being on Shanks' side for the final section of the story, because Mihawk's got nowhere else to go. He might as well chill with Shanks, not joining his crew, but just hanging around. And I like the idea that, Zoro beats Mihawk in straight-up swordsmanship. Shiryu beats Mihawk through, I guess, cheating, dishonorable swordsmanship. I guess the exact opposite of what him and Zoro's duel represents. And then Zoro avenging Mihawk by taking out Shiryu, right? And there's the character stuff that affects there. Same way Luffy would be avenging Shanks. Zoro, Mihawk's his mentor in the same way. The pirate here says, favorite movie or anime that's not from your preferred genre. That's not from my preferred genre. Other than One Piece, I think we have opposite genre preferences. Favorite anime, let's start with that first. That's not from my preferred genre. I think Ping Pong. I don't really, with anime, I don't really stretch myself past my genre preferences that much. But I like Ping Pong, the animation, quite a bit. I don't try Slice of Life, etc. Favorite movie that's not from my preferred genre is different. Not different. Difficult because it just is. It just is, because I'm pretty flexible with movie genres, so it's more like what are specific genres that I don't like. You know what I mean? I'm down for most good movies. You know what I mean? Specific. Movie that's not I guess I'm not into what there's not really a hard movie genre that I'm definitely not into. You know what I mean? Oh, you know what? I generally don't like generally don't like historical fiction type films. The Oscar bait type, because I generally think that they're just not. It's I don't know. You can kind of see how cheap and easy they kind of try and do it while masking it under the facade of being a very high class movie. You know what I mean? The Oscar bait movies, they're actually very cookie cutter, but just under the facade of being something really special, and then they're forgotten about very shortly after. So I think I generally dislike historical fiction quite a lot because they tend to go down the Oscar bait route pretty frequently. I did like The Last Emperor, and I did like Amadeus. Yeah, I like both of those films. Eatham says, Tanner for getting it second try. Second try. Wait, it was Eatham's. Oh, fuck. I got it wrong right away after that. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. First one was a bit of a fumble, but no worries. English has gone downhill since they dropped the letter. What? What the fuck is this? The letter B to represent the? I learned something new today. I learned that we have in fact lost a letter from the English language. Thank you, Ethams, for, educating me on this. But I did not know that we were missing a letter. A letter that looks suspiciously like the letter B, but is in fact the letter th, or represents th. Who would have thought that? We've actually lost letters over the course of the English language. I like to think that we would be gaining letters over time, 26 letters, we could have 27 by this point. Turns out we already had 27. Who knows how many we originally had? Did we have 100? I don't know. This is actually spooking me out a little bit. I didn't know we were missing letters. Someone's got to alert, all the companies that matter. Scrabble, Wordle, if you guys do that. We're missing some letters. Keyboard manufacturers, I don't have that th letter on my keyboard. We're missing some important stuff here. Pedro Vinicius Priest Welter, what a name. Says, if color of armament can be forced outwards, do you think observation hockey could be turned inwards? Maybe to become immune to other people's observation on perceiving your presence or attacks. So I actually had a video that's now incorrect, which is basically like I thought that Sanji might be developing that type of observation haki. So the Minks, they had somehow concealed their presence from observation haki users when the Strahts and Law first arrived on Zou, right? So that led me to believe that, oh, there's a way um, to hide your haki, basically, conceal your presence, right? And I was hoping that Sanji would learn that ability because Sanji had picked up invisibility as an ability, right? But Sanji never learned that ability. Maybe he still can. Maybe he still can, but at the moment he has not picked up that ability. What you just provided is an interesting explanation of how that ability would be possible, which would be turning your observation haki inwards. I didn't think about the mechanics of it, but that is something that I did think for a while. C. Whitney says apparently and, so like I guess that's the ampersand symbol. I might have pronounced that wrong, but you know what I mean. Used to be in the alphabet. I did not know that. That's interesting. Cigar says it's break week. What Twitter drama can we expect? No, I'm sworn off of that stuff. Don't worry about that. Ashlyn Mario says it's not B, lol. I mean, obviously not. Obviously there was only room for one B in the alphabet, so they kicked that one out. And ever since then, they had to write TH to represent the sound that that letter used to make. But, it's clearly like shitty B or something like that. All right, I'm probably gonna call the stream pretty soon because I'm a little hungry. So I think let's say no more super chats, no more supers. Let me answer 2 more good questions, and then I'll call the stream on that. How does that sound? Because that's what's happening. Steal your skills, Tio says we didn't even see Kid using Conqueror's Haki. I think that we will see him use it by the end of this arc. I do think we'll see Kid use it by the end of this arc. So, I'm interested. Michael Valdez says, why did Big Mom give Kaido his fruit? My theory is that she gave him the fruit and threw him in the ocean to avoid the battle. That's a wild theory. So she protected Kaido like that? I don't know about that. That's a really, really, really interesting idea. But I do think that, we did see a silhouette of Kaido laughing during the Rocks battle, you know? So it does raise that question. I do... Wait, 1 second. Hazard and Gibson, I do want to make Chainsaw Man content. I might do it a few months down the line or something. Or maybe when the anime is around the corner, which, is, as I understand, will be this year. Alter Space Nate says, what if Weevil was captured and that's why Marco was comfortable coming to Wano? It's hard to say because, like, Marco was already, like, the note that he had Nekomamushi take to Wano also said that he's coming. So it's hard to say. I don't know if it means that Weevil was captured or at least Marco thought that, okay, Weevil's occupied, therefore I can go to Wano. All right, I'll do one more question. One more question. Colin says, would you ever do a video compiling a list of your smaller theories that don't fit in their own video? I think something like that would be cool to see. That is actually a really, really interesting idea, Colin. Really, really interesting idea. I will think about that. That's a really cool idea. I had not thought about that. I've thought about, like, oh, every video needs to be, like, full theory or whatever. But, yeah, like, I could fit the Weevil theory in there, something like that. There's a lot of those smaller theories that fit. Ali Labuama says, is Chainsaw Man really that good? I don't know anybody who's tried Chainsaw Man that straight up didn't like it, you know? And I think it's a really fast, easy read, so it's just fun to read. It's just fun to read. Like, I don't know anyone that doesn't like Chainsaw Man. Overanalyze says, do you think One Piece will end in the log town? I think that Luffy's story ends in the log town. I don't know if I mean it's literally the town of beginning and end. I don't know what else to say on that. I don't know if that's like the final page of the series or what. Like maybe we see reactions from Zoro, Sanji, Straw Hats, etc. strewn around the world. But I do think that like Luffy's story ends in Logtown. And I think that I'm going to call it on that. I think that's a good place to call it.